The story begins with a phrase. They say that things we use with care come to harbor a soul. And if that's the case, what will inhabit the trash? Then a stuffed animal is seen, which had a small opening, and the girl was crying because it wasn't useful anymore. The mother calmed her. They just had to throw it away, and she would get her another one. A secondary voice appears. People easily transform things into trash, and then begin to treat them as something dirty, and never value them again. And that also happens with people. And now we are shown a place where said trash arrives, and an officer there hears some small noises inside the containers. And upon looking, it is seen that at the bottom, something was moving, demanding to know who he was. Access was forbidden there for unauthorized people. He shouldn't move, and he thinks he recognizes him. It was one of the trash ruffians who were on the wanted notices. He was taking trash and endangering the beauty of the marginalized city, pressing the emergency button so he couldn't escape. And so all the officers arrived, asking him to surrender peacefully. But he threw garbage bags at them, jumping towards the ventilation duct. But in the room he entered, there were more officers shooting at him so he couldn't escape. But they were surprised by how fast he was, who jumped and ran dodging their bullets at an impressive speed. And he had escaped them, giving the order to search for him immediately before he got further away from that place. Meanwhile, our protagonist believes they were just a bunch of shitty exaggerators. The scene changes for us. In the city, high society people were talking about the ruffian who had reappeared. But they interrupted their conversation because they saw this guy who was different from them, clearly because of his old and dirty clothes, and they wonder why he was there. He should never appear again. And we are shown on the left side a very clean and developed city, and on the right side, a society sunk in misery. And other children from that place talked about rumors again that he had gone stealing again. It was clear that the guards would start watching everyone because of him, and she expressed to Ludo if he had gone to collect trash in that place again. And she asks him why he insisted so much on collecting that trash. If they caught him, he had no idea what they could do to him. He expressed that the rich people were throwing away things that could still be used. Furthermore, if he found good things, there were people who would buy his objects, and so he could survive. And other children approached, expressing that there was a stench of shit around that place. It was an almost unbearable smell, informing the girl that if she kept hanging out with him, she would start to stink too. Or didn't you know that that bastard always wore his gloves all the time? If she touched them, she would clearly get a disease. Or hadn't she seen what he had under his gloves? It was something very horrifying. Besides that, he was the vile son of a murderer. It is said that the place where they were was for detaining criminals, and they were the descendants. That's why everyone strived, working hard to remove that bad image from themselves. But because his father killed people, all that crumbled. And if she stays with him, everyone will think she is also a murderer. Seeing that chilling look, they screamed that this was what they were talking about. Those eyes belonged to a criminal, running away, because they knew that in the future, he would become a murderer. But she calmed him down. Seriously, they said bad things about him, but she didn't believe he was a bad person. Ludo was surprised and thanked him. Checking his things, she thought that was very nice. That phrase made her think without giving it to him, telling him that the bear was not for sale, because he was about to give it to her. But just then Chihua called. They had to leave immediately, and so they said goodbye, leaving Ludo frozen, because it was his first act of affection towards someone. But he couldn't make it happen. Meanwhile, someone was watching him. Upon arriving home, he exclaimed that he had returned, but they mocked him, repeating his words. So that bear wasn't for sale, demanding that he be clearer when expressing his feelings. Ludo only stammered, but now they looked at him coldly. He had to tell him the story of the garbage collector at night. Upon hearing his story, they asked him to calm down. He shouldn't take those risks. As long as he was a child, he would take care of him, but he expressed that it was not risky at all. Yesterday they hadn't discovered him, but they asked him if they hadn't discovered him the day before yesterday. He knew what he thought, that they were not related by blood, but he had to know they were family. It was time for him to correct his habits so they wouldn't arrest him. Hearing that, Ludo believed he had taken him in when he was an abandoned baby and raised him since then. That's why he promised he wouldn't get into any more trouble. He kept thinking, he felt that if he were always so honest, that girl might fall in love with him. Ludo yelled at him what that had to do with what they were talking about, and when he moved, he complained about the bullet he had been shot with. He asked him to take off his gloves so he could heal him, asking him that if he was going to that place again, he would come back even more injured. And the protagonist felt that wound wasn't a big deal, since it didn't compare to the wounds his father had inflicted on him. And Ludo's arms full of wounds are shown to us. It is told that when they met, he explained the only rule of that place, which was not to kill, or else he would be thrown into the abyss. And his father had been thrown into that place, asking him that from now on he should know how to differentiate good from bad, even being in that shitty world. Ludo says that his hands were black since he could remember. He always had an unbearable pain that stalked him in his daily life. He was also stalked by disgusted looks due to the ugliness of his wounds, and that was the moment Lecto gave him those gloves. They were too big for him at the time, but despite that, the unbearable pain that haunted him every day gradually subsided. That's why he had great gratitude and enormous affection for him, who at that time only encouraged him to get that girl as a girlfriend. And that's why he had to practice his smile. However, a hooded subject with a covered face is shown to us. The next day, Ludo was trying to smile to look good, but he thought he couldn't make a good impression with those eyes. And as he walked, he wondered if that mattered to her. And as he continued walking, a brief view of the place is given to us. He believes the abyss was a huge garbage dump. Everything ended up thrown there, even people who committed crimes. He wonders about their whereabouts, and at that moment Chigusa appeared, greeting him happily. She had doubts about all that and called him out, because the only thing she didn't want to see was his execution. She knew he liked to go for the rich people's trash. At that moment, the protagonist didn't hear much. He only believed that Lecto had told him that if she worried about him, it was because he liked her, expressing that he liked her out loud, dying of shame for how stupid he was. And already dead with shame, he tells her that the stuffed animal was for her. This made her very happy. Believing she would take care of it forever, Ludo got excited seeing that, and became so ashamed that he ran away. He was extremely thrilled, feeling he had to tell Lecto. It was the best thing that had happened to him in life. But just then, he bumped into that subject, from whom a peculiar book fell, but that didn't matter to him right now. He had to tell the man who cared for him so much the excellent news, exclaiming that he had returned home, telling him a small fragment of what had happened. However, the image he saw in his eyes was heartbreaking. The father figure he had was pierced by a knife. He rambled for a few seconds, but ran towards him, stuttering his name, his brain's instinctive words wavering. Lecto, agonizing with a choked voice, only asked him to flee that place, but they told him not to speak. He had to resist, he would help him, but with his mouth full of blood, he screamed at him to flee that damned place, and exclaiming that he should change that shitty world, please. Ludo didn't understand those words, and a paralyzing shot hit him in the back. Demanding that he stay still, he was going to be led as the author of the murder. Ludo asked them what they were saying. Obviously, it wasn't him. However, his words were useless. The evidence was more than clear. He was stained with blood. Ludo lost control, screaming that his friend hadn't died yet. They had to help him, screaming that he hadn't done anything over and over, but a blow stunned him. Comments began to circulate through the neighborhood. It seemed Ludo had finally murdered someone. Moreover, the victim was his own adoptive father. Chigusa couldn't believe it. She refused to believe it. Then, in the abyss, they proclaimed his grave crime, committed in that beautiful sacred land. Not content with dirtying the landfill and spoiling the city, he had extended his disgusting hands to take someone's life. Therefore, he was condemned to death. The abyss had to swallow all his filth. Ludo, with a lost look, wonders how he got to this, begging them to please listen to him. And he spots Chigusa, screaming that Lecto had been murdered, begging her to please find the culprit. But she didn't even lift her gaze, expressing that she had believed in him, but at the end of it all, he really was the son of a murderer, and all those present shouted to throw the filth into the abyss, shouting barbarities over and over. However, Ludo laughed. The filthy ones were them, beings who possessed no free will. They had eyes and ears, but they were just a multitude that couldn't see or hear, blinded by fear. And in that multitude was that subject. The protagonist exclaimed that he had done it, but his shouts were cut short. Ludo yelled at him that he would find him and kill the others. After a long fall, he opened his eyes. He was surrounded by trash. The place had an unbearable smell, wondering what this place was. And behind him, something gigantic was approaching. Ludo couldn't understand why 20-meter beasts were chasing him, wondering what the hell they were, and why they looked like piles of garbage. Managing to dodge the first attack and looking down, he touched a skull with his hand, falling into despair, cursing all the subjects who sent him to that damned place, and then he tripped over a bag, falling from the mound of trash. Then the beasts calmed down a bit. Ludo felt that if he stayed in that place, he would die. Also, the air was too heavy. He felt his lungs were about to explode. So first he had to find a place to hide, but looking up, he only saw a wasteland of trash everywhere, wondering if there was a safe place there. And he started coughing up blood, and the beasts, hearing that, began to approach. The protagonist wonders what he should do. Everything was over for him. However, he sees an illusion of Lecto, who was bloody next to him, and his eyes came back to life. He denied it. He couldn't die. He still had something to do. The guy who murdered Lecto, the people who unjustly accused him, the people who looked at him with contempt. He wouldn't die for them. He would get revenge on all of them. Until then, he wouldn't let them take his life. In the distance, someone watched the disaster he was causing, and the protagonist assumed an impressive speed, attacking the beast, but it managed to hit him. However, Ludo would not give up. Picking up a hard surface, he attacked with all his might, managing to split the beast in half. But at that moment, the gigantic creature fell apart, and tons of debris fell on his body. And his legs wouldn't respond, but all that weight rested on an umbrella. The protagonist understood nothing, wondering who that guy was, who dragged him and kicked him in the ribs, so that he expelled all the garbage air he had breathed, putting a mask on him, and now he could breathe comfortably. Asking him if he lived there, what that place was, what those monsters were, what kind of world that was. He had fallen from above, yelling at him that he couldn't hear him. He had to speak louder. The masked subject yelled at him to shut up. He was a damn loudmouth. Thanks to his screams, those damned things had found them. Ludo couldn't believe it. He was supposed to have defeated it recently, but they explained to him that those things were garbage beasts. If you beat it with a normal weapon, it was useless, and when they hear humans, they go after them. And that's why he spoke softly and didn't want to move too much, and it was all his fault. And the masked man felt relief, as he hadn't shouted in a long time, and so he began to clean, starting to spin his umbrella, creating an enormous whirlwind, making the garbage monster explode into thousands of pieces. And it wasn't over yet. One breaker, 8 tears. Ludo couldn't believe it. He had cleaned absolutely everything in one go. Wondering whose the hell he was, he took off his mask and introduced himself as Jin. He was a kind of cleaner, and now he challenged him. Because of him, he had taken off his mask. Then the scene changes for us. Lecto asks him why he was like that. The protagonist told him that the neighborhood kids had pushed him because he had told them that things were alive. That's why they laughed and hit him, and they also told him that he hadn't hit them back, demanding that the other day he had told him that if he valued things for a long time, those things would harbor a soul, and that's why he had believed him. He clarified that it was just a legend, but he affirmed it. Even a soul could be inside that feather, or that towel, or anywhere in that room. or even in those gloves if he treasured them. He was sure they would harbor a soul, and he began to gain awareness, expressing to Lecto that he would treasure them. But he woke up, wondering what was happening, and realized he was bound by chains, demanding that he remove those things immediately. He had to go back up, but the other only laughed, asking him how he planned to reach the heavens. At that moment it was impossible, but the protagonist denied it. He was going to return. If it was impossible at the moment, there should be a moment to do it, and he had to know it. He had to tell him, demanding and demanding. He wouldn't shut up until he told him. And Jin got tired of his behavior, believing he should teach him a lesson. He was no longer on his ground, dragging him and throwing him forward, and thus he said goodbye. He had to check something. Ludo kept demanding a lot of times, but they didn't listen to him, and when he turned around, masked people appeared, wondering why a child was there. Also, when they got closer, they noticed his clothes, surprised, wondering if he was a celestial. Ludo didn't understand. He only told them that he had fallen from above. This made them happy. It was a miracle. They couldn't believe it. It was their lucky day. They never thought in their lives they would find a living celestial. Ludo thinks he is safe, but instead of being chained by the body, they put him on a truck. And they tied his arms. They just laughed. He was their treasure at that moment. The bodies of celestials were sold for a very good price, especially arms, legs, and eyes. And seeing his doubt, they would tell him why his body was worth so much. Simply because everyone hated them. They threw waste from above. And that trash turned into piles of garbage. The air became poisonous, even producing monsters. All the people who died were because of his damned fault, and he wonders what they would do to a living celestial. Torture. A dissection show. There were many options, but for now he had to eat. They would have problems if he died of hunger by giving him garbage food. He had to eat it all, and now they mocked him. Maybe that plate wasn't to the liking of a celestial. Clearly, he was royalty who had never touched trash in his life. But that's what they felt every day because of him. He had to keep eating because from now on he would only live. Infinite suffering. But at that moment, Ludo bit their fingers. This one let out a cry to the sky. The others couldn't believe it. Ludo started eating. That wasn't trash, it was still edible, repeating the word. Everyone, absolutely everyone, heaven or earth, trash or locals, up or down, only see what suits them best. And they divide everything for their benefit. He could no longer remain silent and let them do whatever they wanted with him. He would never endure something like this again. Never again. Those present don't understand him, wondering what was happening. And Jin laughed. He had a lot of energy, and in the protagonist's head the phrase sounded. If you treasure those gloves, they will give you power, and chains started to appear. Everyone screamed that it couldn't be. Could celestials also be givers? The one without fingers screamed that he didn't care. They just had to kill that son of a bitch, but Ludo unleashed all his repressed anger. One managed to hit his weapon, believing that with that he would lose all his power, but the protagonist's eyes remained hateful. Lifting a tire, turning it into a weapon too. They couldn't believe it. Could he use more than one weapon? Seeing such a demon, he asked him to step away. Ludo was going to kill him, but they stopped him. He had to stop. Ludo started to relax. His eyes returned to normal, and fresh blood came out of his nose. He didn't understand what was happening. And Jin apologized, but he had to find out if he had that power. He was going to tell him everything about that world and those powers, and in return, he had to join the janitors. Ludo was surprised, but said not even dead. Then, in a base, the grandfather believed he was a unique specimen. He was very lucky. He should thank the janitor with his life. If he had breathed that air a little longer, he would have died, and he clarified that she was not a grandmother. And for his insolence, he only had to pay him and leave that place. Then Ludo thanked him for paying for his healing, but he didn't want to join them. He only wanted information. He asked him to realize that the people in that place would not treat him well if they found out. So he just had to shut up and follow him. Then Ludo was surprised. He never thought that a city could exist in that land of trash. Even completely edible food, and they introduced themselves cordially and explained that they would start the course of that place. In that land, it was very easy for all kinds of emotions to accumulate in the trash. And in that, at some point, it transformed into energy and gave rise to several phenomena. Some, like the stained beasts, were the ones he saw a moment ago, which, when they see humans, do not hesitate to attack. They inhabit the outskirts of the dump, but sometimes they invade cities. And ordinary weapons didn't work against them, because after all, they were thought cores. But they told him that with those gloves, he could defeat them, just like with knives that a chef had worked his whole life with, or a feather that had accompanied a writer for years, if humans used things they treasured with all their heart for a long time. These would end up harboring thoughts inside them, and that's why they would become artifacts. And since thoughts are the cores of the stained beasts, only an artifact that harbors thoughts can destroy them. However, it is extremely rare for a person to obtain the energy of said artifacts. And these are called givers. In summary, they are janitors from an organization whose objective is to exterminate the beasts. That's why they wanted him to join. He had no idea how to get up there, but he did have contacts with someone who might know. Seeing Ludo frustrated, he asked him who had given him those gloves. He replied that it was his father. For him, it was the only memory he had left. And Jin believed that although they looked old, it was noticeable that he treasured them, and with that his election ended, handing him his funds, since that was the money he had earned by selling his clothes. And they asked him to calm down. Anyway, he hadn't even realized it. With that he had paid for his care, and he was going to leave, because he would look for someone who could take care of his education. Ludo just cursed him, and at that moment, a cat jumped onto his table and stole the money. Yelling that it was a damned cat, he had to go back to him, picking up a stick and managing to stop the kitten. But someone with a cold voice asked him that it belonged to him. He had to give it to him immediately. He expressed that the money was his. However, the other denied it. He wasn't talking about the money. He was talking about the stick, immediately taking it away. Ludo didn't understand him. Why was he getting so angry about that? And he was surprised because he had the same insignia that En had. Jin. He thought he had just met him, but it seemed to him that he needed an election. And he immediately attacked him. He knew him, Ludo the Prodigy. And Jin had told him about him. He introduced himself as Sanka, to whom his education had been entrusted. He never thought his first lesson would be learning not to touch other people's things. Also, his parents said he always lacked discipline. Ludo was surprised. How he knew Lecto. And he began to remember his teachings, believing that this subject should be upset because he thought he was going to steal his staff. So it was because of him that they had a misunderstanding. Apologizing immediately, his attitude completely changed, starting to only say good things towards him. And now, if they introduced themselves correctly, they also talked about their artifacts, and Ludo believed it was the best time to smile. Because his teacher had told him that on such occasions, it reaffirmed trust, expressing that he was collaborating with the janitors to achieve his goal. And reach up again. Ludo, seeing that he got angry about his goal, tries again, but now they start arguing, believing that goal was trash. Also, his smile stank. They fought with everything they had in every confrontation. And then he left with a completely selfish and unattainable goal. Thinking he was just playing, Ludo asked him what he had said. That was not an unrealistic goal. He meant it very seriously. He would do anything to get up there again and achieve his goal. Sanka became serious, believing his attitude needed to improve. Also, from the moment he laid eyes on him, he had wanted to fight. Ludo, grabbing something from the trash, believed that he too. The subject couldn't believe it. Were his artifact the gloves? Did that mean his power was to transform everything he touched into a human weapon, believing he was simply a genius? But against him, he had no chance of winning. Ludo wonders where his staff was. Looking up, he narrowly dodges it. Wondering when he had done that, and he was already positioned in front of him. Zanka believed he was too slow to guard, feeling that the only incredible thing about him was his artifact. Ludo managed to land a blow, but he dodged it and slammed him against the floor, asking him if he couldn't do anything else. And he wonders what he had on his face, and upon realizing what it was, he starts screaming like crazy. Demanding why he had a potato mashed with him, he was going to kill him, but Ludo attacked him. And he started demanding over and over again not to do that. The protagonist didn't know why he reacted like that. But it was working, starting to chase him everywhere. And then Enjin appeared, expressing that they should get on. Then he died laughing, believing he had a lot of creativity for combat, throwing potato. Sanka never thought he would go through so much embarrassment, asking him to stop laughing, and formally informed him that he was his instructor. Although it didn't seem like it, he was the most skilled janitor in the use of artifacts. That's why he would be a very good teacher, and someone woke up, believing she was curious about the new boy. Feeling that his hair was incredible, he also had a very nice color. Ludo just went crazy. A girl was playing with his hair. Yenjin told them that they had arrived at their home, the janitor's headquarters. Welcome to the cleaner's base. In that place, the girl said goodbye to Ludo, and Yenjin introduced her to his receptionist, who caught flies just with her hands. She was delighted to meet him, and she would like to see his potential, because her artifact was her glasses. She had kinetic vision and could see the true nature of people, but when she tried to look at Ludo, errors appeared in her ability. With her gaze lowered, she believes he had outstanding harmonization, but stable enough to use powers naturally. Jin asked her if that was all. She, with a serious voice, also expressed that he had shit all over his neck. He just laughed, and they said goodbye because they were going to find the boss now. And as they moved forward, they told him there were about 100 cleaners. Fighters, guards, but they are distributed in different headquarters. For now, he would only meet a few, and upon opening the door, there were many of them there. Enji closed the door, believing that for now there were many, he would meet them later, and that was the boss's room, who would give him valuable information for his work. And they also told him that the cleaners respected their boss, because his true strength came from his complete loyalty. And gathering courage and opening the door, there was no one. The woman apologized, but her boss was on a business trip for a while. And Jin apologized and wondered what to do with the new one. And the woman appeared, believing that she still had a cleaning job, so she could join them. Besides that, she wanted to know more about Ludo. The scene changes for us. She believed that was an easy request, but they had to observe carefully. It is told that Lillian had told them that, in the contaminated region, small stained beasts were approaching the barricade. And they wanted the janitors to come and clean it up just in case. Ludo didn't understand what the contaminated region was. She challenged Jane, and would explain it to him properly, not like that baboon. The place where humans lived was called the safe region, and where the contaminated trash was. And the stained beasts lived. It was known as the contaminated region. And the place where he fell was very dangerous. It was the forbidden region. So far, 6 places have been identified as forbidden regions. If an ordinary person set foot there, they would die almost instantly. They are extremely dangerous even for givers. It had been a miracle that he survived. That's why they wore those masks, to avoid inhaling toxic substances that could cause them very annoying diseases. And she clarifies that in his current state, without the mask he would die in 15 minutes. Returning to the present, he believes that now that he remembered, he always thought that place would look like this. But it never occurred to him that there were people living there, wondering if any person from above knew of their existence. But to his mind, it was just a mountain of treasures. He wanted to take everything to repair it, and he expressed to the girl that he was curious about who they were. They said that they were also janitors, called supporters. They helped the janitors, and they were essential partners. He introduced himself, greeting him cordially, and squeezed too hard. They explained that his grip could even break the outer part of the stained beasts. It was super cool. Thanks to that, it gave him some security to have him by his side. and one of them spotted the beasts, confirming that they were approaching. Ludo couldn't believe it, there were a lot of them. It was supposed to be a very easy job. Nobody told him it would be this dangerous, but she just laughed. Everything would be fine. Those beasts moved very slowly and didn't have much power. They were ideal for him to learn. So she wished him the best of luck, and they all approached quickly. Seeing that he was still agitated, she calmed him down. Apparently they weren't that slow, but they were perfect for him, and if he cleaned everything, they could go home again. Ludo was still frozen. How could she be calm with a job that could perfectly cost her life? She smiled. To live life in that land, maintaining calm was crucial. Ludo accepted it. She was right. That was what he lacked. But suddenly, a huge beast appeared next to him, slowly turning its neck. He asks her if he should remain calm, right? She was amazed. That was crazy. She had never seen such a big stained beast. It was a unique opportunity, and so she would take out her scissors, laughing. She thinks she should take care of the small ones first, throwing her scissors in the air, jumping, and catching them with her foot, attacking him. Ludo wonders what just happened. She had spun around with her legs and killed all the beasts. The helper explained that those scissors were Riju's artifact. Although scissors are normally used with hands, she turned them into a weapon with her legs. And they also told him not to stand still, as they were on an outing, turning around and punching the beast, yelling at Riju. She accepted his request and raised her scissors, asking them to keep throwing the beasts with confidence. Ludo was impressed. Although the users couldn't defeat the stained beasts, they made them imposing for a moment, so that the Jeevers could give them the finishing blow. Believing he wanted to help, Riju accepted him. It had been quite clean, and now it was the big one's turn. The helpers noticed that, so they gave the order to keep tearing the beasts apart until their giver could help them. But one of those beasts managed to knock down a helper forming behind him. His friend yelled at him to get out of there, and an attack was coming. But Ludo got in the way, expressing that he had only joined the janitors to gather information. But he doesn't intend to be a nuisance to everyone. He was going to prove he was worth something too, they just had to pay attention to him. And suddenly, the staff he was carrying began to divide. Even he was surprised, wondering what that form was, how he had used that power. Rillo appeared, who flattered him for jumping to save someone without hesitating. He hadn't done anything wrong. The helper apologized to Yudo, he had made a mistake, thanking him for saving him. And they asked him if he had defeated the colossal one. She said she had split it exactly in half, but as they saw, it hadn't been useful. No matter how many times she cut it with her artifact, it didn't disintegrate. The helpers couldn't believe it. Was it a stained beast that artifacts did nothing to? She didn't understand either. The beasts always had the same weaknesses as humans, but this one was different. However, it didn't matter to her. She would keep cutting it until she couldn't anymore. The helpers would retreat and go to document and report the case of the new species. They would also alert the surrounding cities. Ludo felt imposing, eager to give support, but he just stayed quiet. And Rillo jumped, asking him if he would like a haircut, starting to cut everything on his head. And upon opening its skull, they discovered something shining inside it. The beast, feeling threatened, managed to hit her, burrowing under the surface, managing to reach. And breaking where Lether was, who was bewildered. He was supposed to plan to help them, but he couldn't use his artifact. He just ended up being a burden to them. Wondering what he was doing there. However, the helper reached his arm, starting to run at full speed, who asked him to snap out of it. He doesn't know why he froze at that moment, but the only thing he could do in that situation was run. But the beast stalked them. However, Rijo appeared in the air, believing that this was its weak point. They wonder if they finally defeated it. She nodded, and it seemed that thing was its vital point. He couldn't believe it. Was that an artifact? What did that mean? How was there an artifact inside that beast? The scene changes for us. Ludo's master was just waking up, and he felt a lot of noise from that room. And upon entering, everyone was celebrating. It was for Ludo's welcome party to the land. But he clearly knew that those subjects had only come to drink, because Ludo was there without the will to live. And there, they took the opportunity to talk about the incident that had occurred with the beast and the core it had. Meanwhile, Ludo just looked at his gloves, and someone sat down in front of him. They still hadn't introduced themselves properly. His name was Gris Rubion, expressing that he had done very well yesterday. But he denied it. He hadn't done absolutely anything. They asked him to reconsider. He had saved Faro from the stained beast. Not knowing his name, they pointed him out as yesterday's supporter, humbly thanking him. Since usually support people like him had to endure scornful looks from the types who saw them for the first time. Since they labeled them as weak humans and a burden to the janitors, but Ludo seemed different to him. The boy Faro had joined the janitors to clean the stained beasts, but he wasn't capable of killing them. That's why he treasured an object with his soul to turn it into a treasured object, and thus become a giver. And thanks to him, his dreams remained intact, and he expressed to Ludo that he knew he wanted to become very strong. But he should put that aside. Surely he had something he wanted from the beginning, before coming to that land, asking him what it was. He just remained silent. Gris asked him to then recover his innocence. He was sure that someday he would understand his goal, which should come to mind naturally. Almost like breathing. Therefore, he just had to trust himself, and in that way he could live a life despite having fallen into that land. An engine appeared, believing he was very tired. They should eat something. Riju nodded. If he didn't hurry, they wouldn't leave him a single bite. Gris asked them to go and move forward with them. He deserved it. In another place, the subject asked him to please stop. He had told everything he knew. He didn't want to suffer anymore. This dark being agreed. And he babbled white hair and black tips, eyes with dark circles, that a celestial giver died to see him. The next day, the receptionist received a call and a mission. Then everyone gathered expressing that they had a request. He agreed, but he had a doubt. Why was that apprentice with them? It was true that he had been assigned as an instructor, but that kid was not qualified to be a janitor yet. She explained that the request for Ludo to go was because of the mission details. Some merchants were crossing the contaminated region when a stained beast attacked them and stole an important cargo from them. And what was being asked to recover was cargo that was taken from them. And that cargo belonged to someone who fell from the sky alive. It was obvious that finding living celestials one after another could be considered an anomaly. But the best for such a case was Ludo, for being a celestial. And they asked him if he agreed with that. He believes he couldn't use his artifact well. He could end up being a burden, just like the last mission. But if there was any clue on how to get back up there, he wouldn't hesitate to refuse. And so they all left because the team was complete, since Jin had told him that with him, it should be more than enough. Upon hearing that, his eyes changed completely, and as he moved forward, he was totally happy and encouraged to complete that mission, and they were talking about how the supporter didn't have any defensive object. But he denied it. He always carried a small knife in case he needed it, and the friend told Ludo that Gris also kept an amulet. Almost always when they went out, he prayed to that. Peace. Gris challenged him as those things weren't said and showed his amulet. It was a trinket he had bought at a stall. He didn't believe praying to it would achieve anything. But he lost nothing by doing it, and they were surprised because that woman suddenly appeared. Who was happy? Because they were finally arriving. She had made the request. That's why she would guide them towards the beast. And they also said that, when they were transporting their merchandise, they had found the celestial. But since he was unconscious, they couldn't ask him anything. That's why they wanted the beast to remove it soon. Seeing that Ludo told him they would use him as merchandise, he denied it. He meant it seriously. They were very worried about him. Sanka fell silent, believing that if a beast had reached the celestial, it was very probable that he was dead. And she apologized for the long walk. The beast had run inside that building. Ludo was nervous. Sanka had no idea where he could be, and in the distance, a type of person was seen. She yelled to him that he was the Celestial. They had to run quickly towards him, pushing them to get close to him. However, upon getting closer, it was a doll, and they shouted that it was time, and the floor began to collapse. They wondered what had just happened. The floor had turned to mud. She asked if they were okay. Seeing his affirmation, his face began to melt and footsteps appeared near them, pointing at them. They believed he should be the celestial giver. Sanka understood. It made sense now. Those purple lanterns and those traps were the fault of the scavengers, who exclaimed that they would take the celestial. They explained to Ludo that the scavengers were a gang of thieves. They used to be a small group, but after years they became a real headache. Besides that, there were rumors about questionable experiments they performed, but the most important thing is that all the scavengers were givers. Gris asked 3 of them to secure the escape route, Faro, and he would escort Ludo. They accepted and apologized to Sanka, since he should take care of them. Sanka believed it was the best they could do, so they had to leave. Ludo, while running, wondered why they weren't fighting, but he denied it. Those subjects were not beings they could confront, they just had to get as far away as possible. Sanka felt it was always the same. They wanted the Celestial to sell him, but she denied it. They wanted to capture him to know more about the sky, and there was no better source than that child. They were dying to ask him how he crossed the border alive. Sanka didn't know what she meant by border, but she calmed him down. They didn't need to talk anymore. He had to meet his mud dolls, as they wanted to greet him. He understood. It had all been his ability's fault, but it was going to be easy to finish them off, because his dolls were too weak. She affirmed. They might be weak, but they could have some tricks, and Sanka received a direct hit from the bald one, who felt he was a mere rookie. She laughed again. She had forgotten to mention that this was already planned. Perhaps she was thinking of using her wide-range attack, but if she moved, she would get more stuck. And according to her calculations, he was the only one who could be a combat opponent. Sanka managed to see the mud doll, and upon hitting it, he managed to see the fist hitting the body. However, another one appeared, managing to hit him in the back. However, he remained standing. She laughed again. She had forgotten to mention that this was already planned. Perhaps she was thinking of using her wide-range attack, but if she moved, she would get more stuck. And according to her calculations, he was the only one who could be a combat opponent. If they defeated him, the others would calmly go after the Celestial. Sanka believed that after enduring and observing them, she could more or less understand their powers. She used that shovel as her artifact to control the mud, and the other had a hitter-type artifact. Or so she thought, but no, what he had were simple fists, and what he had under his feet were snowshoes. She had heard that those things made it easier to walk on unstable ground, and since he wasn't sinking, that's why they had chosen him as their partner, believing they were opponents that suited him perfectly. Feeling that he knew his artifact inside out, weight, smell, texture, where to fall, trajectory, and he would show her one of his tricks by hitting the floor with his staff, feeling that they were just showing off. That's why he had finished them off with one blow. And someone behind him thought he was also just showing off. Ludo, for his part, felt that everything had gone silent now. And he bumped into Gris. The supporters had found the emergency exit. Gris asked them to go ask for help. He was going to see what happened to Zanka, and they heard footsteps, asking Zanka if he was okay. But they were surprised, because that wasn't their friend, and they asked him who he was. And this one disappeared from their sight, and he exclaimed that he was the celestial giver then. And this one broke the entire wall. Now the exit was completely destroyed. The one with the braid felt he had taken too long to arrive, because he had gotten lost. Gris asked him what had happened to Sanka, but he didn't answer. He just asked Ludo to take off that mask. There was someone who wanted to talk to him. Seeing Ludo's refusal, he explained that his friend should be fine, although his poison might have been too strong for him. Instead, if he came with him peacefully, he wouldn't feel any pain. But the supporters came out to defend him, but this one dodged their blows and kicked them. Foro realized that he was very strong. Ludo realized the situation and asked that the only one they needed was him. That's why they should leave. Gris placed his arm to interpose. He would take care of protecting them with all his valor. The subject just sighed. He had heard that supporters were just weaklings. How was he going to protect them? Ludo stammered. If he only had his fists, it was best they fled that place. They didn't need him to protect them. It didn't matter if he stayed alone. Yelling at them to flee, the subject asked him not to be sad. But his friend could no longer move, because he had already died on them. However, everything was going to be fine, because the weaklings had no shred of value. Ludo just froze seeing the heartbreaking image of his friend. Remembering the image of his father, and the necklace jumped into his sight. Grabbing it, and a black cloak covered the scene. Lecto asked Ludo what he was doing. Approaching, he asked him to stop hitting his head against the wall, demanding why he was doing that. He told him that he had told him not to hurt other people, so he took it out on himself. Lecto tried to explain the situation well, teaching him that he shouldn't do that. The pain in his arms would soon disappear, and he should do what his heart told him. But Ludo denied it. There was nothing inside him. He was always in a bad mood, and he couldn't describe why he was always angry. Lecto understood him. He had been thinking that he had been abandoned by his parents. Those feelings got into his head, turning that into his bad mood. For that hour, he should find something he liked. He should take his time to find those things. Even that small corridor could gradually fill up with things he liked. And when he brought someone he liked, he should tell him too. And so Lecto pulled him out of that bubble, with walks observing nature, reading books. Playing with him, teaching him to cook. But he kept feeling empty. Until one day, he saw through a crack on the other side of the city and saw someone throw something away. His senses activated, and he ran in that direction. Lecto wondered what was wrong with him, and Ludo started crying buckets. He didn't understand, he was just a little broken, but they threw him away just like that. He hadn't even been able to give his best. He wanted to repair it. Repeating that he wanted to repair it, Lecto was surprised. So he had the ability to find value, even in the things people threw away. We return to the present. Ludo had taken Gris's necklace, who was laughing agonized. They were very wrong. Ludo's ability was never to turn artifacts into things when he touched them, but rather to bring out the maximum expression of the value of things. The subject exclaimed that he was very cool, asking him what ability he had. His friend asked him to please hold on a little. Ludo believes that thanks to Gris, he remembered the root of what he originally wanted. Without his words, he would have lost his mind at the slightest provocation. But it wasn't like that anymore. He rejected everything he had said, and he would reaffirm everything he had rejected. Then he would kick his ass. This one was surprised and smiled. He introduced himself as Jabbar, and he felt like having fun with him. They had to beat each other to pieces as much as possible. The friend cursed. He kept losing blood, but Gris calmed him. Everything was fine, feeling that when he met Ludo. He couldn't use his artifact well. But now it was different. Jabbar was surprised. He thought he felt like fighting, but no. He hadn't moved a centimeter. Ludo called him a bastard and challenged him to get close to him. He got angry. He had told him his name, so he would teach him a lesson, jumping towards Ludo. He didn't understand anything. Why did he dodge him? It was very boring. He had to fight him, even for a little while. Jabbar wonders what was happening, why his attacks weren't hitting him. Ludo felt that Gris used to pray to that amulet so that everyone would arrive home in one piece. That's why they needed incredible defense. That's what he imagined in his head. Jabbar understood. His ability was specialized in repelling, but he had a weakness. He couldn't attack either. Ludo clarified that he hadn't moved at any moment. It was true that that amulet couldn't be used to attack, because it was the incarnation of Gris's prayers. But for that very reason, he would use the weapon Gris used, his own fists. Jabbar was surprised. He seemed like an innocent child, but he had a good punch. Ludo just cursed at him. over and over again. And Yabar asked him to calm down his vocabulary, quickly approaching him. But Ludo saw his attack, lowering a fold of his invocation and thus protecting himself, and managing to land another blow. And Yabar was excited, breaking a pillar and throwing himself towards Ludo, making a screen so he couldn't see him. But the amulet's eye hadn't lost sight of him. This one just laughed. It was very interesting, jumping from side to side quickly, but Ludo managed to stop every approach he tried to make, thinking he had had enough. However, Jabbar was crazy, feeling that he needed a beating like that. It was incredible. That's why he would give him a taste of how he felt, believing that this artifact he used had the ability to detect hostility, causing him to avoid attacks that contained it. That's why he couldn't avoid the debris completely, because they didn't contain hostility, and his Manquira artifact contained a powerful neurotoxin in the right claw. Starting to stab his chest, laughing, feeling that it always hurt him to do that, warning that with that he would faint. And his consciousness would go into autopilot, warning him to take care. Fainting and losing consciousness, but his body reacted, breaking the wall into thousands of pieces. His breathing accelerated, his veins dilated, and a scream appeared on the scene. And in an instant, he was in front of Ludo. The protagonist never thought he had so much power. Besides, if things continued like this, Gris and Foro would be in trouble. And this one attacked again. Ludo's defense wasn't enough to cover him, but he managed to throw him with his arm. This one got up drowsily and only screamed. Ludo was surprised. That subject had really pulverized his brain with his poison. And Gris's amulet only detected hostility. He was between a rock and a hard place. His experience and determination were at totally different levels, wondering if that subject was a masochist. And this one attacked again, breaking the pillars and jumping from side to side. Ludo tries to defend himself, but for the first time his defense is broken. The claws were going to stab him, but something approached, and Yaba's body fell to the ground. Someone complained. How did he dislike that bastard? He asked Ludo to leave him alone. He would teach him a good lesson, so he would know his place. Ludo was surprised, so he was still alive, although now he looked like a kind of zombie. He denied it. What did he say? He was fresh like lettuce. He shouldn't underestimate him. Also, he knew his ability wasn't useful, because that subject was unconscious. To not have hostility, he had been observing and analyzing them while they fought. It wasn't for nothing that he was his instructor. He couldn't use his weapon to attack, and he still couldn't move because of that poison. And if things were like that, he should let himself be hit. It was going to be just a test, like a cooperative little hit. Although he could barely move, if he attacked him, there was a good chance his defense could help him move. His beloved friend, the staff, had the range of his fists. With that, his attacks could reach him, without him having a chance to touch them with that claw. Ludo doubted it. If he made a mistake, he would end up injured by his blow. Sanka believes that then it wasn't a big deal, and Yaba had stood up again, attacking them with his claws, breaking the entire pillar, asking Ludo not to let himself be touched by those claws. He had only touched him a little, and he couldn't even blink, but Ludo expressed that it wasn't a big deal. Sanka got angry. Now he really wanted to hit him, and the eyes reacted, managing to throw him towards Yaba. And thus they could land a blow. Ludo got angry. What was that? Did he attack him with hostility? Sanka tried to calm him. It was just a joke, but it seemed they had found a good way to deal with their current state. Wondering what would happen if he hit him from behind. Ludo was just furious, and again it worked. Sanka believed his ability was great, but he felt he was being a bit rough. Ludo demanded that now he was going to teach him what rough really was. Sanka cursed him. He had to be more considerate with him, hitting him again, and Ludo's ability threw him towards him again. Yaba woke up surprised. It was the annoying kid from a while ago, and this one slammed him against the floor. And Sanka also fell, believing that they had finally finished. He could no longer move, and behind Ludo the amulet began to break. Ludo couldn't believe it. Griss's amulet had broken completely. It couldn't be, he hadn't done anything. Wondering what he should do now. Filling up with questions, Ludo started to get agitated. His mind began to wander. Thoughts took over him. An anguish ran through him, making him fall to the ground. Sanka doesn't understand him. At what point did he let himself be touched by the claw, and Yaba poisoned himself again? Believing he had fun more than enough. Sanka doesn't understand him. They gave him a hell of a beating because he was standing. He explained that it was because of his left claw. He laughed because they thought he regenerated, but no, it just made his pain disappear. His poison lasted 10 minutes in his body, but in his it would last 30 since he wasn't used to it. That's why he would give him one more prick, apologizing to Ludo for taking so long. Now they would leave, saying goodbye cordially. And on the way, he remembered those two. He had to go pick them up. Ludo doesn't understand him. His body couldn't move at all. Also, because of him, Griss and everyone had failed their mission. Java, upon jumping, doesn't understand either. He was supposed to still be inside the building. But Rijo exclaimed that he had found him. And an umbrella appeared, believing that it seemed they had fun, feeling that this warranted a good cleaning. And Jin believed that from so far down, it was clear that chokers weren't useful for communication. If it weren't for those guys, they would never have been able to find them, and they asked him to calm down. His boys weren't so weak to be murdered so easily, and first of all, they had to take care of that subject. Who was laughing? A bunch of strong guys had appeared. He was getting excited. And Jin asks Ludo if strange guys like this always came to him. Riju was happy because he was in better shape than he thought, but they denied it. What were they talking about? The poor thing could barely breathe. The big guy was furious. How dare they do that to one of his companions? It was unforgivable. Yaba got more excited. They were also crazy. The most sensible thing would be to escape, but he had been given the mission to deliver greetings. So it didn't matter if he died. He couldn't return without completing his mission, jumping towards them. But they stopped him. It was time to return. He got angry. They couldn't ask him for something like that. He hadn't finished his job yet. He was just about to start playing. But they whispered to him that the boss was grinning from ear to ear. He calmed down. It seemed like the time. He asked for forgiveness, but he had to return. Thanking him for such a good time. Although he should be unconscious, asking him to tell him that when he woke up. But the protagonist yelled at him that he couldn't leave. It wasn't over yet. He would make him pay double, no, triple, for everything he had done to Griss. This one was surprised. Did he remain conscious the whole time despite giving him all his poison? He had an incredible spirit, believing that the next time they met, they would play a little more. And he noticed his gloves, believing that he also had that series. Being happy, his boss would be very happy to find out. And so they said goodbye, asking him to take care. Ludo didn't understand what series referred to, looking at his gloves. Then they were all gathered again. Ludo, sobbing, just wanted to see Griss. Upon seeing him, he apologized. It wasn't his intention to break his amulet. This one started to speak. His amulet was something he treasured, and that it had served to help him. It filled him with happiness, congratulating him for his great job. Then they were at the base. And Jin asked him what he was doing in a place like that, and with such a gloomy face, believing that he could now use his artifact well. Starting to flatter him. But Ludo interrupted him. Griss had been stabbed because of him. He couldn't have another face. Up there in heaven, he couldn't save the person who saved him. And down here on earth, the same thing had happened, believing that it always ended the same way. Wondering if he could ever change, and Jin calmed him down. Griss was already prepared to risk his life for his companions. He protected him not because he was a celestial, but because he recognized him as a companion capable of treasuring things. And people too, standing up, believing they should go visit him. Upon entering, he congratulated him for having awakened his power. Ludo rubbed his eyes. Was he alive? How was it possible? Everyone fell silent and calmed him down. Everything was going to be fine, it had already happened. No wonder his spirits were low. He had thought Gris had died, treating him like a child over and over again. Ludo got angry, he wasn't mistaken. What else could he imagine if he saw how they were torn apart before his eyes? Gris explained that it was all thanks to the janitor's medical team, and the one who shone the most this time was her. Her name was Acha, the only healing giver among the janitors, who is shown to us as very introverted. Gris thanked her for everything, 402. He shouldn't be discouraged. Thanks to him not leaving him alone, he didn't suffer collateral damage from the battle attacks. 40 started crying, and they also expressed words to Ludo. They thanked him for his work. He could even face such a strong opponent, putting him against the wall, and asked him not to worry about the amulet. He was very happy for what he did. Ludo looked down, but he was also very happy that he was alive. And Jin felt that now that everything was resolved, he clarified to them that the scavengers had decided to openly seek a fight against them. That meant that they no longer only had to face the stained beasts, but them too. Also, they had new information, and someone exclaimed that it seemed the scavengers were also investigating the border. And things related to the sky. Ludo wonders who that subject was, and upon hearing that he was the leader, he was speechless. He was very pleased to meet him. His name was Corvez, he was now the head of the janitors, and he asked him if his objective was to return to the sky. And if so, they didn't need someone like him. However, they had discovered how good he was, since he put his life at risk for his companions. Without further objection, from his peer, he officially declared that the janitors welcomed him as one of their own. And so they asked him to follow him to give him clothes and exchange information. They explained that the border, as its name suggested, was a threshold between heaven and earth, to which people had tried to cross, but died instantly. And in the region closest to the border, a woman had disappeared. His contacts said that once, a certain traveler lost his way and ended up in the forbidden region. And it was that woman who saved him. That's when the traveler asked her why she was in that place, to which she replied that she saw people falling from above. But there was one particular guy who didn't die despite going up and down. It was possible that this woman knew about someone capable of crossing the border. What he meant is that if they found her, they could have information to return, but of course, going there involved many risks. Asking if he still wanted to go. Ludo, without hesitation, affirmed, of course, that he wanted to go. Then, Jin believed that the janitor's uniform looked very good on him, and in that forum he tried to stop Ludo. He had already been told that they couldn't go see the woman in the forbidden region, trying to stop him. But he had a lot of strength. He believed they had said that there might be a clue in that place to reach heaven. That's why they should go immediately, but they silenced him to go to a forbidden place. They needed at least information, and to confirm his power. Or did he want to die? Ludo didn't understand what confirming his power meant. He explained to him that he had been able to use his power, but he didn't know it in detail. That's why they should accompany him. Also, they clarified that the scavengers might have been in that place. Ludo, upon hearing that word, asked why the scavengers could be givers. He explained to him that not all humans were good people, and not all could treasure things. But in the same way, there were bad people who had ties with things. What he meant was that it doesn't matter if you are bad or good, you can treasure things with love equally. The protagonist looked down, understanding the situation. Then in his room, he thought about what to do, feeling very bored, and Ryu arrived, expressing that he came to show him everything the janitors had. The training room, the cafeteria, the bathrooms, and now they would head to the kitchen. Asking him what kind of dishes Heaven ate, or did they only eat sweets? Ludo didn't understand what sweets were, those things only rich people could eat. He ate bread, soup and things like that, but she told them it was their lucky day, they had sweets. And Jin asked them what they were doing there, and told him Ludo's story. And Jin explained to him that those sweets here on Earth were almost like drugs, due to all the pollution. It was difficult to obtain them, but they had specialized in being able to get them. Believing he should try one, Ludo, upon taking a bite, shouted with joy, wondering what that was. It was very delicious. Both felt that it seemed he liked it more than normal, and Ludo, with sweets in his mouth. Of someone approaching, wondering what was wrong with him, feeling that they were coming for the sweets. But he wanted to eat many more. However, he closed his eyes and handed him a lollipop. This one ate it, but again he extended his hand. And Ludo asked them what was up with that damned creature. Then, in the hallway, the two of them are talking, wondering what they should do with Ludo. He had emptied the entire candy warehouse. Sanka believed that child was up to his tricks again, so he would go see him, and upon seeing that huge thing, he yelled at him that it was an alert of some kind, a stranger had entered the base. But they clarified to him that it was Ludo. Then the scene changes for us, everyone is quiet, and they ask Ludo if he couldn't use his artifact anymore. And Jin believes that he went so crazy over the sweets that he forgot how it was done, and they started laughing. They were supposed to confirm his ability, but they only confirmed that they should put him on a diet. Ludo was just embarrassed, wondering why, until he remembered how he had used his power. And everything. Sanka started to think, believing that before Ludo was a repairman, feeling that this could be the basis. Believing that his ability only reacted to trash or broken things, and they brought him some trash. Asking him to choose something he liked among all those things. And Ludo was amazed, choosing a ruler, which turned into a weapon. And Jin congratulated him, as always he was so sharp, that's why he was his instructor. This one was happy, but he calmed down, believing that it would always be easier to teach a genius. And now he asked him to take more trash, and everything he touched turned into a weapon, believing that the protagonist was totally broken. But this one started bleeding, falling to the floor. And Jin felt that this was what he feared. The other day, he had also started using other artifacts and ended up like this. It seemed that the quality of the gloves was incredible, but his body couldn't keep up. Since the longer time he spent with his objects, the more affinity and better compatibility he had. Although that wasn't everything, experience and way of thinking that they had with said object also flowed. Sanka nodded, but certainly its quality should be quite good, since he had treasured them since he was a child. Wondering why his power affected him so much. And Ludo asked himself if that was true. Then, why did all the objects he converted end up in pieces? It was as if they had a time limit, but the three came to think that Ludo didn't break the things he transformed. But rather he took advantage of the maximum value and qualities of each object, leaving them without regrets. Telling him that if it was as they thought, he hadn't destroyed Griss's amulet, nor any other object. He had only brought them to their maximum expression. Ludo looked at his gloves, so his ability wasn't something that destroyed things, but something that gave them value. And Ryo asked him what his gloves were called, since every artifact had a name. His was Tripper, Engine's was Unbreaker, Sanka's was Amiston, but Ludo hadn't thought of a name for them. Believing he should think about it more. Then the scene changes for us, expressing to his boss that they had returned, who expressed the words seriously. City of Arts, Desert Altar, Artifacts, Vigilante Series Ludo. Returning to the base, Ludo was soaking his arms, which wouldn't stop hurting. Then, upon entering his room, Rijo was there. She felt it was too late for him to be awake. The protagonist asks her why she was in his room, and when she entered. She told him that his room was right above. She had heard him moan a lot, so she simply came down to see what was wrong. Asking him if it was because his hands hurt. Ludo apologized. His hands rarely hurt when he had his gloves on, but he had to wash them occasionally. And she asked if those wounds were burns or what they were. Ludo didn't know either, so he would have to ask his shitty parents, since he didn't have an idea either. She stood up, believing that parents always gave a variety of things, both good and bad. Jumping back to his room. The next day the janitors were looking towards a door, as someone was just cursing one. And again, throwing papers around like crazy, believing it would take a little longer. And everyone gathered told him that Ludo's helmet wasn't ready yet. They told the protagonist that this was an artifact that janitors were obliged to wear when going to the Forbidden Region. And they had an artist who made their clothes, but he always worked at his own pace. So, until it was ready, they had to go look for an amulet for good luck. Lillian explained that they didn't know what could be in the forbidden region. They could even step on something and explode. Also, the woman who was in the lost region had low probabilities of being alive. And that's why they had to do everything to prevent any event. Ludo then asks what they should do. He told him that they should go to the city of Graffiti, to Kamba's town. And on that occasion, his companions in the search for the woman of the forbidden region would be those behind him, the janitor Sanka, Riju and Injin. On the defender's side, Delmond and Tamsi for the support side, Gris, Foro and Tom. The basic tactic was to mobilize 5 supporters, but now that they were going to the forbidden region, they usually took fewer supporters and more givers. And someone yelled his name. He had already heard his life story, but how much he had suffered. He would not forgive those who did horrendous things to his companions. However, they asked Bellman to calm down. Aludo had invited Injin. That meant he belonged to the Sakutas. Asking Aludo to excuse him, although he also liked enthusiastic people. And Injin asked Delmont to show how passionate he was. This one took a breath, yelling that they were going to Kamba Stone. A path full of difficulties awaited them, but they would not give up, asking why. And everyone answered him because they were janitors. And a feeling of camaraderie. For the first time, it ran through Ludo's body, and so they advanced through the dump. Ludo believed that cars were very convenient. Then they arrived at Cambus Luton, where the first thing shown to us is people making graffiti. Who insulted them because they had scared them. Ludo was surprised. It was something incredible. Asking if all the cities in that land looked like that. They said that a good part of the large cities had a dome appearance. That was to protect from what they threw from the sky, since many times the thrown trash could crush people. And someone at the entrance wondered what that was. There was something very strange in that city that wouldn't let them enter. Even if the doors were open, there was a type of barrier. The janitors told Ludo to go through. He shouldn't be afraid. If he didn't have questionable thoughts in his head, he would be free to enter and leave the city. Upon entering, the city is shown to us. Admire this wonderful panel of drawings. Everywhere there were people painting throughout that land. It was said that for this they had created that place, to have free expression, and everyone started talking about the paintings. Ludo wondered if they had only come to observe that, but they denied it. They came to find a giver from an artist lineage who was in that city. His ability had the power to place talismans on the things he painted. For example, if someone attacked that wall, the first attack would not take effect, as it gave it feelings and meaning. That's why the guys from the beginning couldn't enter the city. That giver had used the ability to place an amulet on the wall with the intention that people who came with malice could not enter. He had a very unusual artifact, but it wasn't an object in itself, but something that passed from generation to generation. And this girl appeared who was crying, and she stood up and ran away, completely ignoring him. And someone appeared. They had arrived sooner than she thought. Seeing that they wanted to see the talisman, he fell silent and told them that he had died. They couldn't understand him, but they told him that he had a bodily illness, since that boy went to other contaminated regions to paint to take care of people. There was no doubt that he enjoyed painting and protecting people, but he often took off his mask. He always warned him of the same thing, but he still hadn't listened to him. Ludo got worried. That was the illness they were all talking about, and the old man asked them to calm down because of the amulet. Since there was a problem. As they knew, the object was passed down from generation to generation, and this girl was named Ramillan Tizark. She was the successor Goff had chosen as the next enchantress. Those present felt she was too young. They said that for their graffiti city, Goff could be considered the most beloved authority and most respected, and as they could imagine, that would be very difficult to overcome, especially for her. Foro also said that if the object wasn't treated with affection, it would no longer be an artifact. Also, the successor had to have talent to be able to use it. Ludo now wonders if his gloves were really inherited artifacts. The mayor apologized, but it seemed it would take some time this time, since Rimlin was extremely attached to Goff. He was like her older brother, and for something like that to happen suddenly was devastating. They said that Goff was a kind and protective subject who responded to any call. And Jin nodded. He was an incredible guy. He always had the best smile, which always protected everyone. It was a shame not to see him again. That's why they would go for a walk for a while, so they could grieve. The mayor apologized, feeling it was the best thing. And Jin told the girl that they would see each other another time, but she stood up immediately, yelling that it was over. Everything was over. The depression was already gone. They had to behave as such. That was a festival. Taking the artifact and running away. Everyone fell silent. They didn't know what had happened, and on the rooftop they asked him what was wrong with him. Rimblin had been thinking that the sadness from Gob's death had broken her heart. But she was sure that if they kept crying, Gob wouldn't be able to enjoy the afterlife. That was exactly why she had to do something, and a huge invocation had occurred. Starting to draw, and hundreds of cans were injected out and exploded like fireworks since it was time to celebrate. Everyone had to paint and enjoy until they couldn't anymore, and the whole city started the party. The mayor wiped away his tears, apologized, but it seemed that in the end they would take some time to be able to use the talisman. And Jin accepted it. It had to be that way, since that was the essence of Cambaston, the city of joy. And freedom. Then Ludo had his whole face painted. The girl asks him where else he wanted to go. After Ludo got angry, she introduced herself as Rimlin. She was going to play. She asked for forgiveness. She was going to try very hard as the new enchantress of the city. And now she was going to proceed with Ludo's body, since with that they could mitigate his serious damages. Seeing the authorization, she was going to start. But Jin stopped her. Was she going to tattoo him? Why did it have that shape? If for painting it should be the other way. She had thought they wanted tattoos, but they were apologizing. She wasn't going to tattoo him, asking him if he wanted a tattoo. Sorry, to put on a talisman. They felt that girl didn't learn, and so she graffitied Ludo's back. And so later they said goodbye, thanking her. She was exhausted. She had painted 9 people, but for her first job it was quite good. And so they left, and said that now they would go for Ludo's full-face helmet. But before that they asked him if he wanted to do something he loved. And they arrived at a building. They asked Ludo to delight himself. He was euphoric. Could he really take everything he wanted? Seeing his acceptance, he immediately ran towards the pile of garbage, while a television appeared. And it turned off. Then at the base, a subject screamed like crazy that it was ready. Again and again Ludo asks who that one was. Lillian was about to give the news, but they interrupted her. The mask was ready. This crazy guy was called Agus. He was the one who made things for the teams, coolly reporting his process. He even told him that he had taken his measurements while he slept, because he didn't put a lock on his door. And someone appeared, asking his brother to stop causing trouble for the others. Ludo couldn't believe they were brothers. They had very different personalities. Then they went out for the mission. Ludo was angry. In that land there were a lot of shouters, and they all stopped, asking him to take off his top clothing. For a moment, and everyone started drawing blood from their fingers. He didn't understand, but they told him that in that place they had necklaces called chokers. They were transmitters as well as telephones, which worked with people who exchanged blood. Ludo understood. That's why everyone in that place had those necklaces, and they asked him that now they should give him their blood. Minutes later, they were in the car, asking Ludo to be calm but alert. It was his second time in the Forbidden Region. Danger would find them as soon as they arrived. He had to prepare, and so they arrived at the Forbidden Desert region. Pinta feeling that it was very hot. It seemed like that place was sand, but no, it was waste that had turned to dust. And something was felt from afar. Ludo started putting on his helmet according to the instructions given, and in front of everyone a type of scorpion cockroach appeared, believing they should practice a little. And Jin exclaimed that according to the witnesses, the woman should be much deeper in that desert. so they warned the protagonist not to fall behind. He accepted without hesitation, telling himself that with his gloves, he should be helpful in finding that woman. Then the woman was writing, stained beast, pentaregion. She also looked like a scorpion. And it attacked like a scorpion, possibly venomous. And in front of her, a battle was taking place. Rillo was doing his thing. After defeating it, the stinger was expelled, reaching another scorpion. Senka believed it wasn't him, but this one got angry, attacking him with all his fury. However, he felt it was very noisy, attacking it equally. The stinger approached, but he managed to slip away, managing to land a blow on the lower part of the beast. But behind him, another one was approaching. However, Jin rose into the air. Only one remained, exclaiming to Ludo that it was all his. This one appeared with his new mask at full speed and with a keyboard in his hand, transforming him epically. Someone in the distance smells something, wondering if they came to see her. And Ludo started writing and keys came out expelled, piercing multiple times at once. Ludo rubbed his eyes, and Jin believed that those stained scorpions weren't even a challenge. And since they had come to the surface, it meant there should be a good trash heap buried under all that fake sand. And a shadow appeared. Ludo managed to glimpse it, but it was no one, and something was behind him, yelling at him where he was. It was Delmont and Tansy. Everyone had lost sight because of the sand cloud that had passed, flattering Ludo for his great work. But now they raised their gaze, and a person appeared, who approached, believing it was true. They all came there to see her. Her name was Ami. They wonder how long this woman had been in Dahai. Her field of vision was limited, but they never thought not to feel her presence, and they wondered if she was the woman they were looking for. For now, they perceived no hostility from her. And Riju called her, asking if she was the one who had seen someone go up to heaven and come down to earth. She exclaimed that yes, she had seen that. And Jin sighed. It seemed they had been lucky. But she started coughing, feeling that this place was bad for her lungs. If they wanted to talk, they should do it at Ami's house. In that place, she didn't need masks or anything, and so she led them down a path, exclaiming that they had arrived at Ami's house. Those present were surprised. It was a whole mansion. They could see it even being miles away. With how tall it was, and she invited them to enter her home. Everyone was welcome. Chris, upon entering, felt there were many suspicious things in that place, and she continued guiding them, asking them that living was around there, and they could take off their masks now. The stench couldn't get in there. Nothing would happen to them, even if they took them off, and seeing their doubt, she felt that not seeing the others' faces was rude. Then she was extremely happy. They were very handsome, very nice, and very elegant. It gave her enormous happiness to see everyone's faces. Ludo wonders how there were so many things in that place, and she started playing with his legs, asking them what they wanted to talk to her about. These began to ask about the subject who went up to heaven and came down to earth. But she paid no attention, bringing up another topic. They should talk about the type of people she liked. Everyone was surprised, and she, with a perverse look, told them that she liked strong smells. Smell was more important than face. That's why it turned out that the big gentleman was the one she liked the most. Among all of them, Ludo started to sweat, wondering what she was talking about. However, Jin appeared. He asked the young lady that he understood her proposal. If they told her what type of woman she liked, she would tell them the information they wanted to know. She just fell silent, lowering her gaze, yelling at him what that meant. Did he not want to talk to Ami? He had said it as if he were only trying to take advantage of her. Starting to say nonsense, feeling that he would have preferred her to lie to him. And Jin felt he had chosen his words poorly, since they were also interested in her. She went crazy. She only said pure lies. He wasn't her type. And Jin, seeing her intensity, exclaimed that he would also tell her what he thought, feeling that he didn't know where to look at her. That's why he asked her to put on some clothes. She was stunned. He was a man who commented on a woman's appearance. Until now, he was the worst of all. That's why it was over. They were no longer friends. Ludo, seeing that position, looks at his boots, which had the same sign as his. And she smiled. She left the rest in his hands, sir, and the big one took out his weapon, shooting in Jin. Everyone, looking back, didn't understand what was happening. They asked him what he had just done, but Ludo realized that something was wrong. She had something to do with it, asking if she was a giver and who the hell she was, and this one just laughed. And she asked them what type of people they liked and why they were so quiet. Communication is fundamental among humans. And excluding water parties, they had to tell him. Ludo felt that it was useless, they couldn't keep a conversation going at all. Zanka took a step forward, exclaiming that he was all ready. Tired, she was ugly. The conversations and nonsense were over. He doesn't know what trick she used to do that to in Jin, but he didn't care if she knew about the heavens. Or the earth. If she was hostile, he was going to crush her. Ami started crying because she said such bad things. She was very, very bad. Ami was really hurt, and the giant appeared behind Zanka. This one managed to dodge him, demanding what he was doing, and realized that her ability was manipulation. And the giant yelled at him how he dared to hurt his girl's feelings. It didn't matter if they were even his comrades, he wouldn't forgive them. She was the reason he fought, and he would protect her great cause. Delmont denied it, he was wrong, he wasn't being manipulated. Those were true feelings, and now all his conclusions were in doubt. They didn't understand what was happening. She, seeing them doubtful, got an idea, smiling, asking them if they still hadn't realized. The big guy there had always been a fan of Ami. Tamzi denied it. Delmond wasn't the type to hit his comrades because he really liked someone. But they exclaimed that he didn't understand. For Ami's sake, he was going to betray them all easily because she only wanted to talk. That was all. And Delmont's artifact, the great dumbbell, activated. Ludo doesn't understand because it always ended in a fight, and someone told him from the side that it was all his fault. A child with the blood of a criminal in his veins, he was dirty forever, and he dirtied everyone. Ami smiled, there was one more fan in her ranks, and if they didn't listen to her, the child would pay. As for Ludo, they were in a dark scenario, wondering how the disciples beside him were doing, who filled him with degrading words. Tamzi yelled at him why he was so distracted, saving him from Delmont's attack, who explained the power he had. It was born from the desire to make plants grow bigger, but clearly it was at its maximum power. And if they received an attack from that thing, they would be done for. NG was not in mortal danger, because the nozzle was in silent mode at that moment. But they had to be very alert with that woman. Ryo now moved forward. He really didn't understand why Delmont was behaving like that, so he would confront him. Sanka asked her not to go alone, but she denied it. She had to face him alone, because she couldn't trust anyone else for now. But Sanka yelled at her to look in front of her, and Belmont's full power attack appeared. Ami laughed, but she had to calm down a bit, otherwise she would destroy her whole house. Riju froze, she had been very close, and Ami laughed. They didn't know who was an ally or who was an enemy. She had told them they should talk about their lovers. That was the first step towards peace. Tamzi affirmed it. That woman was crazy, and she asked Ludo to wake up, but he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Had he returned to heaven already? Sanka doesn't know what he was saying, but he smells something, a somewhat nostalgic smell, and Ami asked them how they thought memories were created. It could be by what we see, by what we hear, but Ami thinks it was the smell, asking Ludo to be lovers. Ludo wonders if it was Chigua, seeing that he was happy with his plush toy, he denied it. He didn't take care of it, he just threw it away like trash, he saw it with his own eyes. Tamzi understood, the next one to be controlled was Ludo, because of that woman who was supposed to show them something, but she denied it. She showed them nothing. She was just making an odor of happy moments, emotional moments, after smelling them emit. Everyone would become Ami's protectors, but she stopped talking, feeling that she had talked too much. Sanka accepted it. If they smelled that, they would start confusing her with the person they liked. All they had to do was just stop smelling that. This one started to get furious. They were stupid, idiotic. Ami had already told them that everyone should be happy. Ludo was still kneeling, without wanting to open his eyes. She had abandoned him. He couldn't forgive her, but he didn't understand that feeling of happiness at that moment. Ikigua started screaming. They should let her go, and the girl asked him to save her. And Ludo hit Sanka and Tamsi. They demanded why he hit them, but the protagonist expressed to the guards that he was no longer the same as before. He had more power, so they wouldn't hurt anyone in front of him again, and Riju would protect her too. Foro and the giant expressed the same thing. Tamsi felt they were in trouble. Everyone was under her artifact, believing that he didn't want to use his artifact against his comrades. But there was no other choice. For his part, Delmont imagined a flower, and they thanked him for his hard work. And so she gave the order to all her loves that they should catch the party poopers. Tamsi asked everyone to withstand his attack, and they all lunged towards him. But dozens of ropes came out expelled. Everyone was trapped. She wonders what that was, asking her boys to do something. But they couldn't move. Even the more they moved, the more the ropes got tangled. Tamsi cursed. She thought the pain would bring them back, but she had been wrong. He said that before his weapon was just a spool, but now he could do things like that. And so everyone was trapped. Yami also got wrapped in the ropes, managing to capture her. Sanka, seeing her like that, felt embarrassed for her, and Tom said that he didn't know exactly what was wrong with Jin. That's why they had to take him to the doctor soon. Tamsi, seeing his hand move, understood a little, and the girl remained tied up, screaming like crazy to be let go. Everyone started getting agitated, believing they should free them immediately, putting a lot of pressure. Managing to scare them, Tamsi accepted it. He was already tired. If they liked that girl so much, he would let them go, releasing all the ropes, creating a synergy between his artifact and the ground, creating a kind of human top. Sanka wonders what he had done. That had been too much. Seeing his serenity, he demanded. Did he want to kill his own allies? The girl laughed. So that was her true nature. They were very horrible, even with their own comrades, leading them to death. Seeing how angry he was, they asked Sanka if he had forgotten what happened before. He should remember that if they received a critical hit, this one would be immune at least once. He should remember Ramlin's charm. Everyone was fine. And Jin appeared, taking a shoe. At the base, Lillian observed Ludo's profile, and the boss appeared, believing that those guys wouldn't have major problems with the mission. But the boss realized that she had an unrest, which must be related to something she saw inside Ludo. Asking her if she could tell him what she really saw inside him. Returning to the place, the girl asked him to return her boots immediately. They couldn't touch them. If she touched them, her smell would disappear. They said that Jin, upon receiving the physical attack, pretended to be injured and fell asleep. And so they reached a deal with the girl. They would return the boot, her ability turned off. She accepted, and so everyone returned to normal, telling everything that happened to those affected. The big one was very affected, feeling horribly depressed since he thought his beloved was alive. Sanka felt that ability was one of the most dangerous he had seen. It used the memories of those affected, influencing before and after using them. Sanka asked her if it was okay to give her the shoes. He nodded. That girl must have gone through a very cruel childhood. That's why they had to remove the pH from that guy and teach him to do good. This one got sad. Her house was destroyed, and it was all her fault. Sanka was furious. She had played with everyone's feelings and said those words, and Ludo stood up. He moved towards her. At the base, they told him that so far they had seen many people. However, Ludo was nothing like what she had seen. The gloves weren't the strangest thing, and Ludo approached. The girl asked him if he came to talk to her. Ludo, with a tender face, raised his hand and struck her face. Everyone was surprised, and he hit her again and again. And Lillian felt that something inside Ludo was growing nonstop. To put it in simple words, it was something that could end that world. Something like a curse. Gris asked him to stop. He had gone too far. It was enough. They had already discovered how to deal with her ability. Besides, she was just a girl. Ludo exclaimed that it didn't matter. That girl could defend herself perfectly. She was not helpless at all. She led them there. She laughed at everyone and pushed them to the lowest point of their feelings. He couldn't help but hit her. Everyone fell silent. And Jin agreed with her way of thinking. But now, since they were going to get the information, Ludo realized it. And Jin asked them to go somewhere else. And they asked them to treat the girl's wounds. Then they are silent. Ludo asks him why he didn't challenge him. This one didn't do it because he saw his face. It was clear that he should have realized. Ludo was ashamed. He was still acting the same as before. When he was in heaven, he always had those kinds of behaviors. It didn't matter how many times they told him the same thing. Don't do this, you have to endure it, you have to repress yourself. He knew it when they dragged him to that place. At all times, he thought he would lose control, and once again, a black force and his old self took his body. And he hit her uncontrollably, and then returned to normal. He was just a fool who couldn't control himself. And Jim, for his part, liked innocent-type women, but he loved them to be pleasant. Erotic and patient, believing that this thought wouldn't appeal to any woman. And for the one who couldn't hide things like that, it was a bad habit. They say there are a lot of places where adults must control themselves, so to grow up, it is important to know what kind of things are bad. And change them as you grow. That's why they would go together to apologize later to that girl. While she apologized, they never thought they would go to that extreme, and he treated her kindly. Ami thought she would be a great mother, just like her mother. Thanks to her, he met his father and his first love, the treasure that his master had created when crossing the sky. And coming down to earth. She felt it but was surprised, asking him what he had just said. She said that when she was a child, she always saw a black bird, but her mother asked her to ignore it, since that being couldn't fall in love with her. Ami became sad, so that's why she hated that bird, repeating that she hated it so she should leave. And she told him now that they would go to a place where they would love her forever. And a person is shown to us. The mother was happy for her. If it weren't for that person, no one would love her in this world. He was happy for her. And we are shown with drawings of Ami that her mother sold her, but with a cheerful tone and out of love. And so later they arrived at that mansion, which told her that she couldn't leave that place because the world was very dangerous. And he would take care of her forever. She had many books, a lot of food, a lot of clothes. She was delighted by all those things. He told her that he was the best transporter, that's why they had all that, but he didn't understand why all the transporters hated him anyway. But now she had to accept it. Here it is told with time that the gentleman abused her, telling her that he loved her, using the boots to create loving memories in her. Waking up, she felt in love. It was her first love, but at that moment someone appeared at that door. A masked subject asked for permission. The subject yelled at him what they were doing in that place without permission. They couldn't enter there. He was going to make them pay, activating his boots and jumping towards them. He was going to kick them to death. But the second subject disappeared before their eyes, and they hit him in a second, sending him flying. They took off his boots and passed them to Ami, since those boots would be better by her side. Also, they would serve her as comfort, and after a while he would give her one when the time came. Until that day, she had to use them well, and wings grew on him and he left the place. This made Ami very happy, and behind her the gentleman appeared. She told him what had happened, but they hit her. That guy was a mere human being, and what he had was his. It wasn't something he could touch. Starting to hit her, demanding how many times he had to teach her that he was always right. At that moment, Ami felt totally different feelings. Normally, she never felt anything at all, but now it was different. She felt hostility and pain, and thought those boots suited her better. He didn't understand why those boots reacted to her. It was supposed to be that his artifact only worked with him, but he didn't care, he had to hand them over. They were his. Asking him if he had to discipline her a little more, Ami didn't understand anything. She had feelings of courage. frustration, or something like that. She was even thinking of doing bad things, but it was her first gesture of selfishness. She asked him to please give the shoes to Ami. She couldn't help wanting them, this one just refused. And he treated her badly. Ami exploded. Why? Why did he deny it? She had only asked him for one thing in life. Did he not truly love her? This one got tired trying to forcibly remove the shoes, but in that struggle, this one fell through the hole in the room. At that moment, Ami entered a moment of madness, believing that her whole life was wrong. It had all been because she was sold, but her memories were erased again by the boots. Believing that she wasn't sold, she was meant to be loved. And in conclusion, that's why it had ended like this. Months later, the angel descended to the world again. This one had wings and had disappeared on the sand horizon. Exactly 1 month had passed since that event. They say it was the same time Ludo had descended. And Ludo approached to see what she had drawn for Mea, who said she had dark eyes. Also, there used to be two. Ludo sighed, thanking her with all his heart. He doesn't know if he came for him. He only knew that if he was capable of killing Lecto, he wouldn't forgive him. That's why he would make sure those two stupid people apologized at Lecto's grave. And Ami exclaimed that he also used those gloves to calm himself, didn't he? Something like an emptiness inside his heart. She began to have human emotions, but after using that power, she began to understand many things. Like those that gentleman did to her. And now for all that, Ami was a bad person and felt lonely, and all the people she met only extended their hand to hit her. She didn't know how to be human, feeling that this world would never change for her. Ludo remained silent, but asked her to then learn together to extend a hand to their neighbor. Since he didn't know how to do it either, and he would like to find out with her. The scene changes for us. They ask him if he really didn't want to go. She nodded. She wanted to sort out her thoughts a little more, but they would talk from time to time. Showing the bracelet, and so they said goodbye, leaving the place, believing they had new information. And Ami felt that she wished there was a next time to talk, but someone appeared behind her. He asked them to leave her alone. Ludo, for his part, got very angry with Ami, so much that he gave her a beating. He thought about causing another disaster upon hearing that the angel descended to earth, but understanding what had happened with Nami helped him calm down again. And Jabbar came out wondering if things were going according to his plans. Then they are driving, explaining to Ludo that they would go to the doctor for a checkup and to heal some wounds. And finally, they had arrived. Ludo, upon arriving at the city, found it familiar, feeling alarmed, so the doctor he referred to was him. And the grandfather started screaming. A lot of time had passed. The attendant asked him not to scream so much, couldn't he work in silence? And so he screamed all the time, properly introducing himself as Alice, and someone yelled back at him. That sweet he gave her was very strong. The sister tried to calm him down, and we were told that they were all from the same family. Then they are all healed. The shouter told them that he would go ahead a little, and asked them to be careful with the plug. And so he left at maximum speed. Ludo asks what he meant by plug, and as they advanced in the car, he realized how thousands of things were raining from the sky. That's why they hated the people from paradise so much and wanted revenge, but they couldn't because they would end up losing their lives at the border. Rillo or nodded. They didn't even know how the angel and Ludo had managed to escape alive from there. Ludo didn't know, but he thinks he saw something big. He doesn't remember much, but it was like some kind of border. But he is unjustly interrupted by Lillian's call, who asks them to speed up if they are close. Since they had a mission to get rid of the plagues. Ludo asks what they meant by plagues. And Jin activated a passage, entering through the back door, and only told him that it was funny that insects tried to enter the exterminator's residence. And a lot of weapons are shown to us, which were firing at the base. They were laughing out loud. They felt that this mission was going to be very easy, and if they completed it, they could reach heaven. Ludo, upon understanding, got agitated. Were they attacking him? The attackers yelled at him that there was a way to avoid the next holes. They just had to hand over the celestial. But if they didn't, they would be reduced to ashes. Lillian spoke to them through the megaphone, believing she was talking too much. What they asked made no sense. He just laughed. They were being fair. Also, they were just a decoy. Some of her own should already be infiltrating. She shouldn't be so relaxed. If they didn't give what they asked for, they would start making more holes. She just mocked them and asked them what hole they were talking about. Looking up, they couldn't understand. What the hell was going on? And the other forces appeared. They apologized, but that place was impenetrable. They couldn't get in. In another place, this subject felt that they were attacking him again. If so, they just had to ask for permission. Lillian came out. It seemed they didn't have permission to be there. That's why she would have to get rid of all of them, asking them to show her the best they had. She laughed. She had asked for it. Throwing a missile at her, this one activated her ability, dodging the missile, catching it with her palm, and returning the attack. These got angry. Now she was going to see by shooting her entire arsenal, but this one again activated her gaze, dodging every attack they threw at her. Even placing herself in front of them, starting to hit them all. Seeing their complaints, she asked for silence. They wanted to confront her. Yenjin appeared. It was incredible. She had finished off everyone alone as always. And this one wonders, where did they get the information that Ludo was there? And Jin exclaimed that it was a matter of time for that information to leak. In another place, this subject appeared, who thought he would try something. That's why they should set off. Then everyone was gathered in a bar, eating calmly. Ludo, for his part, was extremely stressed. How could they be so calm after everything that happened? Were they always attacked? And Jin affirmed Senju's defense is unbreakable, and even if they could get past it, their receptionist would stop them anyway. Lugudo asks them why it's just the receptionist if she's so strong. They say that she is extremely strong, but also when she arrived, she liked the office worker life. And her ability was almost impenetrable. No one could beat her. Lugudo was surprised by the extensive world of givers, exclaiming that he wanted to meet more of them. These laughed. Speaking of which, some would attend that place. And a dinosaur appeared skidding, believing they had made them wait. But finally they were there. The big one apologized for the delay. Ludo, upon seeing the child, yelled at him that this time he wouldn't give him any of his food. The dinosaur greeted him, but upon seeing that he didn't remember him, he got angry. He had seen him in the room on the first day, and the big one, upon seeing that they didn't recognize him, introduced them. The girl was Guitar Fantasia, the boy was Santa, and he was responsible for the team brought. And the girl started asking him about the world he lived in, but they stopped her. She couldn't talk about that anywhere, and Jin affirmed it. People might be looking for that kind of information, just like the guys from before. Ludo, upon seeing the girl's insistence and approach, moved a little further away from her. Feeling that it made him nervous, and someone sitting there exclaimed that he had heard a little of their conversation, asking why they were chasing him. Ludo told him about the thieves. And they started talking about the topic, and this one exclaimed that he knew them. They even had something similar to what they were looking for, showing some boots. And he knew that because he was the leader of the Vandals, and looking at the television he accepted it. It was good to see the weather forecast to be ready for the storm. At that moment, everyone got up from their seats. Ludo raised his fist, trying to hit him, but behind him a portal appeared, into which the man also threw himself. Both being absorbed, everyone raised their arms to reach Ludo. And Jin managed it, and everyone held onto him, all being absorbed. The boy smiled. They had captured all the cleaners. Men. Gris can't believe it. Everything had been too fast. They couldn't do anything. The waiter cursed. They had left without paying the bill. In another place, everyone was expelled. They said they missed eating dessert, but Ludo was the only serious one. Looking ahead, he asked them who the hell they were, and upon raising his gaze, lanterns appeared. And they found themselves face to face with the thieves, and Ludo yelled at them where Ami was. And Jin interrupts him. He was a vandal. Surely they wanted to take Ludo, but this one came with gifts. He then wondered what to do with his new gifts, although they were not part of his predictions. That's why they weren't useful to them, and a huge garbage storm appeared, taking everyone through the pipes. Zanka felt they were going to crush him, while Jin went calmly, and they told him that it seemed they would separate, asking him not to die. Ludo, for his part, had been caught. This one asked him where the others had gone. He replied that it didn't matter. They had attended without his permission, but since he didn't like wasting things, he ordered everyone to go. And now he asked Ludo who Ami was. Surely his fury was because of her, but they also shared his anger. His name was Zodil, asking why they didn't bring down heaven together, and they made heaven fall. Ludo doesn't understand him. Make heaven fall. And he spies an image. He asked him what caused him anger in that place. Ludo started imagining all the people who had hurt him, but he denied it. He shouldn't evade his questions, he should answer where he got those shoes from. But this one pointed at him. He was the one evading him. He had already answered him in his own way. Now it was his turn, he didn't like waste, so he shouldn't waste any words. He just had to listen well. Ludo doesn't understand what was wrong with that guy. He couldn't deal with him. It was a very different conversation than Ami's. He felt obliged to answer, feeling that the trash he had in his bag wasn't that much. But if he had no other choice, he had to use it. He remained silent and didn't understand why. He was worried about both the cleaners and Ami, asking why they had joined them. Upon seeing that they answered that it was to return to heaven, he couldn't believe it. They would never help him return. The cleaner's job didn't include returning to heaven. There was only one reason why they accepted it. They only wanted to use him. For her part, Riju felt she had trash all over her body, wondering where everyone had gone. And someone on her back greeted her, thinking she looked like a lost kitten. But upon seeing her, he thought she wasn't that pretty. Ryo was smiling. He was one of the people who said insults from the beginning. He liked her attitude. And Jin was doubtful. Why were they there? Did they want to have a one-on-one battle? Brat, for his part, thought those vandals were worse than he thought, and the woman untied her hair. In Sanka's scenario, they were excited because a lot of time had passed since they last saw each other. He was so happy that this time he could defeat him, jumping towards him. Yaba repeated the word, boils, boils, boils slowly, dodging an attack from Zanka, and positioning himself in a kind of crater, believing that he doesn't know what those things were made of. Wondering what would happen if he put his hand there. Upon putting them in, he screamed in pain, feeling that he was ready. Now his claws had neurotoxins and a mixture of burning trash, and he wondered how long he could dodge it. Throwing burning liquid that had the claws. For her part, the girl felt she was completely alone and saw a cockroach, starting to play with it. Meanwhile, Riju screamed uncontrollably why there was a cockroach, but calmed down. Upon seeing that she had ended up like a coward, feeling that cockroaches could sometimes be terrifying. The woman doesn't understand it. Making a joke. How could they be so useless being cleaners? Asking him if perhaps everyone was that pathetic, Ryo was smiling. Some were worse. Even one had shit thrown at him while running. Yaba laughed. It was incredible. He had been able to dodge all their attacks. Sanka felt that was 100 times better than having shit stuck to his clothes. And if he liked poison so much, he would give him a little of his own medicine, sticking his staff into the ground, throwing it towards him. Meanwhile, the old man expressed to him that his place was underground. Even though they tried to use their necklaces, they wouldn't be able to. Ryo also realized the same thing, and the woman repeated the only order they gave her. Which was, if they encountered someone who wasn't Ludo, they must ensure they defeat him. Calling her kitten. But Ryo stopped her. He couldn't take too long with her, so he would go immediately, putting his scissors on his feet. Jumping and attacking. She, upon dodging, felt that her power had even cut his hair, but it seemed that it hadn't been enough. Ryo denied it. This time he would cut her in half. For his part, Zanka felt he should get out of there. It was clear that nothing had happened to him with that attack. He should have dodged it, but since he didn't appear, he wondered if he had really defeated him. And upon looking down, someone laughed. He had done very well. Thanks to that move, he could show his true self. Sanka doesn't understand. Had he been hiding his true power all this time? Had he never been fighting seriously? This one challenged him. Now they would fight for real. Even he should get serious. Couldn't he just wave a stick? Or did he only have one ability? The woman also told Ryu the same thing. Now yes, they should fight seriously. And this one was on the ground, who wondered why she couldn't move, while the portal boy looked at all the slides. Noting everything that had happened, feeling that he should take a break. Here it is told that the baby boy didn't want to admit that he liked Ludo, but that's why he also jumped in to save him. And the old man in front introduced himself as Bundus, who said he was there on Saddle's orders. But he also had another objective, and the boy, looking down, pulled his clothes, pointing at something. And what came out, there was a type of finger. Bundus exclaimed that the other objective he wanted was information. If they gave it to him, he would tell them what kind of people their boss was. At the cleaner's base, they informed their boss everything that had happened, since Gris had told him everything. It was an emergency. He calmed her down. They had to gather everyone remaining, and he would take care of the rest. Also, they knew a good informant. On the other hand, Jabba exclaimed that he was worthy. As he could see, when he fought normal guys, he held back his power. Also, when he was losing, he always had more energy. That's why he was looking for someone, besides his boss, who could confront him. Starting to laugh. He shouldn't hide his powers. They should be free, cleaners or vandals. We should show him the beast inside him. Sanka looked at the floor, but his eyes lit up. The truth is he had nothing else. On the boss's side, he said that everyone who watches the garbage fall immediately thinks that heaven is abundant. And they think that living beings change according to their environment, especially human beings, to adapt and survive. But he wonders if humanity changes according to its environment, because Ludo and he had the same look. It seemed they shared the same demons. Ludo didn't know what demons he was referring to. He didn't know why he talked about heaven. He treated him like someone abnormal. In the first place, he did what he wanted. He shouldn't try to compare himself to anyone else. He remained silent and looked at the ground, asking what it meant to be normal, saying that in the abyss there were people who see the garbage fall. And they think they are offerings from heaven. It doesn't matter if they are crushed, broken, or if their bodies are hurt, they accept it as a gift. And they live with it. From an outsider's view, that would be an abnormality, but the eyes there became routine. But if they decide to go against that thought, they are repressed, living in a collective thought bubble, flooding themselves with a chemical that represses them. But there was a way to get away from those hallucinations, even if only for a moment, through a shock. Starting to chew the cockroach, that shock must be very convincing, to force people to free themselves from their inner self. Asking him if that shock had happened to him, and very possibly the person fighting Jabbar is experiencing the same thing. But he might end up crushed. Sanka, seeing that he was approaching, accepted it. It seems that subject was also on the side of the geniuses, recalling phrases from his past, which denied the existence of being able to beat people like him. But this one denied it. For that very reason, Yavar was not worthy of a victory, and this one attacked him. Zankas managed to defend, but the other claws appeared, jumping to dodge them. Yavar demanded him for running away, if so he would attack in the same way. But this time he did it with more power, and then activated his temporal ability, managing to break Sanka's defense. And it didn't stop there, approaching, as soon as he fell, attacking on the ground, but his own claw extensions didn't let his attack reach Sanka. But when retracting them, his claw came down, but it didn't work. Sanka had stopped them with his teeth. This one was amazed. He never thought something like that. He couldn't even get through him, and Sanka yelled at him that not yet. Until he proved himself, he wouldn't die, taking his staff and managing to hit his ribs. And with a kick, he broke them and tried to take advantage of the moment, but Esther continued laughing. So he was also holding back. He should teach him a little more. Sanka exclaimed that he should go to hell. He couldn't do something like that. He couldn't hold back, but even a normal guy like him could get to his level. Seeing his speed, he could follow him with his eyes, landing another kick. But Jabber smiled, managing to hit him with his claws. This one contained 3 things: a poison for his senses, also a drug, and then death. Looking at him, he felt that his seriousness was worthless now. He should show what he really had in his mind. The scene changes for us, and Sanka's life is told, who came from a high-prestige family branch. From the city of Kamutari, where they taught the art of being a defender. The children always looked at him as the genius of that place. It was clear because he was the son of the owner of those lands. He was always serene because he had an inner genius. He had the best grades, was the strongest, and probably the most popular among the girls. It is understood that there was no way anyone could win the golden chair at graduation against a genius. But nothing was further from the truth. Sanka was not a serene guy. He trained every day more than anyone, studied more than anyone, but he was always serene to give the appearance of being a genius. Until one day, a female student arrived. They introduced her as an individual from the slums, but super talented. At that moment, he understood what was truly genuine, the meaning of the weak. And of the strong. They said that the Golden Throne was the most honorable place in the academy. And the most outstanding winner of the year was the one who sat there. And that girl, on the first day she arrived, defeated everyone, including Sanka. But his comrades didn't understand. The class genius had been defeated for the first time, feeling that she was conceited. And they spoke ill of her. This one just smiled at her, feeling that she was really strong. He hadn't had any chance, and so he left to get water. But upon arriving, he just cursed everything. He couldn't understand. He was supposed to be the best, but he was easily defeated. However, she arrived next to him. Upon hearing her story about the chair, she didn't care. She gained nothing by sitting there, it was just to pretend. And for others to praise her. Upon hearing that, Sanka looked around. He felt that the fakes were trying to imitate the geniuses. They also tried to steal, and they also blasphemed them. That's why he was disgusted by them. But the one that disgusted him the most was him, a fake who had the audacity to think he was different from the other fakes. The next day, they had to choose a weapon to be defenders. Then there is this subject sitting, asking why he chose that artifact and why he was down there. This one just had a faraway look. He jumped and couldn't get out of there. He said that everyone had thought the same thing, choosing a strong weapon. The genius girl had also done the same, so she tried to show off and chose something broken. And useless, but she received despicable looks. But now she realized that it wasn't even a weapon. In the end, she ended up looking like a pathetic fool, but it had always been like that. Only now did he realize that he was simple garbage, who wanted him to call him a genius. The subject remained silent, asking if then he shouldn't simply surpass the geniuses by being a common person. He didn't even know why he wanted to be a genius in the first place. Also, he had a lot to prove by fighting. Normally, a simple fake would get rid of that garbage item, but this one kept clinging to it. If he doesn't recognize his weaknesses, he won't be strong. And when saying goodbye, he asks her that when she comes to visit him, she must prove to him that an ordinary person can surpass geniuses. That's why, at that moment, he stood up, attracting his staff, yelling at him that he had said he wouldn't die until he proved his worth. He would prove it to everyone, but this was just a hallucination. Jabbar felt that subject was really enjoying the trip, saying that the 3rd stage was coming soon. Deaths. And he also felt that his ribs hurt a lot, exclaiming that it was an unimaginable pain. Although he hoped to fight longer, wondering how he would go to his other comrades. And seeing him laugh, he couldn't believe he was still resisting dying. It seemed there was a party in his head. He also wanted to participate, injecting himself a little. In another place, the dinosaur girl continued chasing the cockroach, and upon raising her gaze, she still hadn't found anyone. She was completely alone. Now her only friend was the cockroach, but it flew, and she chased it so as not to be alone. However, something appeared, a kind of giant heart, and Jabbar exclaimed to Zanka that the fun would end soon. It was time to give the offering to the wandering beast, feeling very happy because he would receive compliments from his boss. But a bullet pierced his leg, and when he fell, he asked her who she belonged to. In another place, Jin wondered what that noise was, and here it is told that this boy was called Ostols. He was extremely introverted, respectfully asking if he could take him as an offering. But first, he should also let himself be beaten. Jin thought about it but said no. 30 minutes earlier, Riju could finally move, since the woman used her hair as an artifact. And it contained electricity, attacking her in a neat and accurate way. But Ryo turned her legs to create a wind wave. She was surprised, but wondered how long she could do the same. Seeing Ryo run, she demanded how he dared to turn his back on her. When pursuing her, he treated her badly. She was very elusive. He was starting to get annoyed. He had to leave at once. Yelling at her to fight immediately, Ryo smiled. He guessed her electricity had a limited time, managing to attack her, but upon following her attack, his hair wasn't cut. She couldn't understand how he had dodged it, and the woman managed to counterattack. She wouldn't let him cut her hair a second time. Thanks to her years of dance, she managed to connect her hair to his nervous system. She shouldn't underestimate her, but as she said, her hair could remain with electricity for a limited time. But she could cancel it whenever she wanted. Seeing that he kept smiling, she thought he was still confident, but she would show him that she was a fighter type, who could compensate for the weaknesses of her artifact. Rijo dodged, surprised, asking about her past. She clarified that she was a woman from the southern village, from the warrior race, Sirelia. No one had heard of them because it was obvious, since they had been annihilated a long time ago. And seeing that she had defended herself, she also believed that she moved well, even using a very large artifact. She clarified that it weighed nothing, she would even be sincere, she could fight better barehanded. This one got angry, who the hell was she? They answered that she was only Riju, nothing more. They started exchanging blows. The woman, after the exchange and seeing Riju falling, decided to use her hair, but he managed to position himself in the air, rotating, activating her artifact. Upon hitting the ground, she quickly attacked, but the woman defended herself, managing to kick her. And a punch to the face, feeling that in the end she wasn't a simple kitten, but it still wasn't enough. And Riju, looking around, asks if someone in that place would hear them. This one denied it. If she tried to scream, no one would hear her, the girl nodded, so no one would hear them. The woman began to calm her, since her friends should already be being handed over as offerings. But a sound interrupted her. Already on the ground, he didn't understand it. How did she carry something like that with her? Ryu approached, telling her that Jin had strictly forbidden them from killing people. But she was so strong that she thought it was more convenient to use her. Also, no one would hear them. She apologized, but she had to help her friends. Also, she had that weapon from her old job. The woman didn't believe it. Was that impossible? Did that mean she was a killer? This one silenced her. It would be a secret between the two of them. She knows they will come to her aid, so they would go where their friends were, wondering which pipe to choose, feeling that it would take a long time to find them. But with a hunch, she chose a pipe. Returning to the present, Jabbar demanded who the hell she was. This one just shot and shot incessantly, feeling that he was a really tough guy. She doubted he was dead. Seeing Sanka's body, she thanked heaven that he was alive, but it seemed he had some kind of toxins. That's why they had to go back to heal him. As for Ludo's scenario, the portal boy appeared, saying a few words to his boss. Zoldy exclaimed that it seemed the cleaners had been stronger than expected. That's why they should leave immediately, and the boy pulled his feet, leading him into another room. This one cursed him, asking him to stop throwing him from one side to the other, asking what the hell that place was. This one challenged him. Could he not communicate without saying profanities in every sentence? He had made him a proposal, that's why he had to start using his brain. Or did he have to bring an illustration book? Ludo just cursed him. He hated people like him. This one wished someone less impulsive had fallen from heaven. But since he didn't understand, he would explain a little, taking off the boots, putting them on the latent being. That was the collection of objects. Guardian tells him that he tried to be one of those, something like his gloves, his coat, or the boots. Those objects, compared to others, had been used for a long time. The energy they contained was immeasurable. The owner of those artifacts must have had similar strength, but no matter how many times he tried to create similar ones, he was never able to create an equal. But in the middle of that experiment, he gave life to something completely new, similar to a wandering beast. But it wasn't the same. They needed to feed it artifacts to be able to move. He must have seen one already. This one had countless amounts of energy. He always knew that the Vigilante's collection had a quality in itself, but it seemed it wasn't enough. Ludo doesn't understand what he meant by collection. He explains to him that his gloves, coat, and boots are part of the same collection. Ludo looks thoughtful. If so, there should be more of those objects. But why did Lecto have one of them if these were from the abyss? But they ask him to please ignore everything now. Based on their conversation, he didn't even know that was an artifact before falling. It was very strange for someone from heaven to have that. And not only that, he had one of the supreme artifacts, and despite becoming a giver with that collection, he remained sane. Ludo yelled at him what he meant by sane. He explained that each of those artifacts belonged to the Vigilante's collection. They had been used by one single man. One single person had created all that, and the thoughts generated by that energy were so powerful as to drive a normal person crazy. Ludo doesn't understand him. He had them for a long time, but he never lost his sanity. This one accepted it. He and Ludo had used the collection without irregularities. He probably should know. There were important parts that made up a person, but it seemed that for them, some parts, they were left aside. Ludo remembered and felt isolated, but they asked him not to get discouraged. It was precisely that which allowed them to use such immense power. He probably wondered if someone could use the collection without difficulty. He should imagine what could be done if they used all the pieces of the collection. That's why, to achieve his goal, he needed to experiment. He tried to imitate the collection and tried to produce it, but that experiment failed. But a failure is not a waste. That's why they took one piece of the series as a core. Then he gave it more artifacts so it could evolve, and something similar to a wandering beast was created. It was a unique experiment which would help him overthrow heaven. That's why they were going to cross the border in the wandering beast. Then they would know who would live and who would die. Even the weather reports were not a waste, as there was a beautiful storm. The girl was crouching upon hearing that, but she was happy. Were they inside a wandering beast? She went crazy. They were going to fight against a giant monster. And Jin, for his part, wonders if that was an earthquake. The boy cursed, he couldn't do it, they still couldn't start, he hadn't even started fighting. And Jin asks the boy several questions, but he didn't answer anything, so he left. Feeling that if he stayed there he wouldn't get anything, so he would go to his friends. The boy started demanding him to stay, trying everything, but very respectfully. And in the end, he let out how to get out of there. They just had to break a wall with his artifact. After all, they were inside a wandering beast. Engine slowly turned his body and yelled at him. What did he say? Was he joking? The boy felt he had said too much. Bandis also asked his boss to wait a little. He still had many questions to ask, asking what he should do. If he stayed there, he would cross the border, and he wanted to experience that feeling. Brat demanded upon hearing that. What did he say? Were they inside a beast? And the boy interposed himself. Engine felt he had many questions, but now that he heard about the wandering beast, they should stop loafing around, because they should remember that they were cleaners. Meanwhile, the wandering beast spread its wings. Bundus, upon seeing his choreography, asked them what they were doing. Out of nowhere, it seemed they felt like playing with him. The big one took out his handkerchief, and the boy activated his pacifier. The old man felt that he agreed. If he didn't hurry, they would literally go to heaven. His personal questions would have to wait. Brod agreed so they would clean that place very quickly. He was stunned because he had tied up the boy, and this one started spinning and throwing him towards a wall. Bandus was surprised. Did that boy have the ability to break walls? And the boy started hitting the wall, but they were simple hits, without even a gram of strength. Bundus asked Brat to stop that. He knew he loved his children, but he also had to show him reality. This way he would protect them from greater harm, and this one was trapped. Brat felt that when a child wants to move forward, adults are the ones who stop them the most. That's why he let him go free. Also, he had to listen to the growing sounds of the blows. Bandus, upon turning, understood each blow was getting stronger. And they explained to him that the more he hit a target, the more power he absorbed, and the stronger he became. That was the power of Centralion. But they realized that this was not the wall to get out, and the old man laughed. It was more than he expected. And if that was the case, he had to stop that growth of blows with his own hands. And robotic arms started to appear, managing to break free from Brat's artifact, exclaiming that if his goal was to take down the wandering beast, his was just to keep them in that place, but at that moment the whole place flew away. The old man apologized, but it seemed he couldn't stop them there because it looked like everything was ready. And the wandering beast began to stand up. They were going straight to the border where death awaited them all. But first, he wanted to finish them off. Brat kept falling, and upon seeing the little one's help, he threw his handkerchief at him, asking him to stay calm. They were going to break everything together until they got home, just like they did that day. But the old man yelled at them that he was going to stop them. If he defeated them, his boss would give him a prize, approaching quickly. But when they were in the air, a car hit him, leaving him inside it. The three were surprised. The old man started yelling that he should look ahead. They were going to crash. That's why he refused to die, managing to hit the debris with his arms. And Brod held onto a pillar, managing to direct the car towards a pipe, where he glanced to his side. It already looked like Engine. Seeing them, she was speechless. Brod asks him what he was doing there. The old man also asks him what he was doing there, and why he didn't know about this fact of his opponent. This one started crying. He was very rude. He hadn't wanted to attack him even once. He had even told him his plan, and when he finally thought they would attack him, he just left because he wanted to go look for his friends. Brat interrupts them. It was not a time to relax. Right now they were heading towards their death. They had a wandering beast flying. And it would go directly to the border. It was obvious that if it crossed the border they would die, and Jin didn't even know how it was possible for such a monster to fly. Wondering if the others knew, and the boy tried to test the signal, and now yes, they could communicate. Lilith screamed that she had finally managed to enter, asking if everything was okay, challenging Engine because he never took anything seriously. Upon telling him the situation, she demanded that they were cleaners. They should clean the beast and get out of there. Also, he was an idiot. How could he let people be kidnapped right in front of his nose? Engine apologized, but it seemed he had an idea of how to gather them all and thus get them out of there. He said that he had the name Engine after someone to whom he owed everything. It came from an ancient language meaning person who connects with others, and now it would become the emblem that brought them together since umbrellas are easy to find. Lilith accepted it. She left the rest to him, also thanks to the report they were able to locate them. The boss had spoken with his informants, and all reinforcements were heading there. For his part, Zottel told him that every 6 years a garbage storm appeared. And today was that day, and his wandering beast would ride those winds until it reached heaven. That's why he didn't want him to become an offering. He had a lot of valuable information about heaven. He should come with him to fulfill his goals. He couldn't do that with the cleaners. The only thing those subjects did was clean beasts. There was nothing useful in a world like the one they were in, exclaiming to him that he should eliminate his own garbage. If he had goals to complete, if he had an ounce of brain, he should get rid of all the garbage surrounding him. Ludo raised his fists, believing that he had named those gloves. He had given them because of the people he met. When garbage became a problem, they had the idea to reduce it, reuse it, or crush it. The IGF had told him about that. The 3 Rs, which were a perfect name for his artifact. And now he understood. It didn't matter if it was garbage or people. Nothing really, it was a waste. Even talking to him wasn't a waste. He had helped him know what he had, and he hadn't. Ludo had friends, they knew him. They weren't family, rather. He was like a piece of trash with anger. But they gave him a home, to a person from heaven who kept getting into trouble. But they never treated him like a burden. They treated him like a person. In heaven or in the abyss. The cleaners were the only ones besides Lecto who saw him for who he really was. He would never forget his revenge or his anger, but he wouldn't abandon his friends either. That's why he would fulfill his revenge, but with them by his side. This one immediately launched against him. He exclaimed that he had been poisoned by hypocrisy and greed. That's why he would make a prediction, which will be a regret for not following him. Seeing that he kept talking about his friends, he would kill him, and if so, where were his friends now? And a crunch was felt, and an umbrella rose in the sky, and Jin exclaimed to them that they were there. 5 minutes ago, Bandu stood up, believing they couldn't do anything inside a giant beast. Not even they knew where they were. Finding their friends would be impossible, and Jin denied it. The only thing he had to do was try a little harder, jumping and using the artifact. The boy and Broda also jumped blindly. Bandus couldn't believe it. Had they found where everyone was? They denied it, clearly not, but that guy's hunches were always correct. And so he had found them. Sodal was surprised. He never thought one of them would reach that place, but behind Jin the 4 cleaners appeared. Ryo thanked him for making that path for him. If it weren't for him, he would have gotten lost. Here it is also told that the dinosaur girl hit her head. Ludo stood up, believing that after all, his friends were still alive. Also, he was tired of their slow and stupid experiments. The beast's core was right there, just like his comrades. He had to know. His experiment was over. However, Zottel denied it. In fact, he would get his results very soon. They just had to wait until they crossed the border. And Jin at that moment, seeing Zenka in that state, stared fixedly at her, but she denied it. She hadn't done anything, she hadn't killed anyone. And Zottel felt that he had taken too long, but finally they were going to start. It was a race against time. At that moment, Ludo launched against the core. He only talked nonsense. The only thing he understood is that if the beast was powered by artifacts like the beast from last time, it meant they had to clean the core before they reached the border, transforming an object into a nail gun. And Jin felt it was great. Ryo just found out they were inside a wandering beast. The nails headed towards the core, but a huge hand appeared. He apologized for the delay. Previously, he had taken his opponents too lightly. That's why now he would show his true power, and he would choose the pace of the fight. And Jin and Ryo, with one look, agreed to split up and attack the core, but both were intercepted, since he would lend them a hand. Broad thought that he also had a hand for him. Ludo also thought the same, attacking the core at the same time, but to the surprise of the 4. He also stopped his attack, believing that it seemed that, until they reached the border, they couldn't stop him. Also, he clarified to them that he still had one hand left to use. Elsewhere, the portal boy asked him if everything was ready. She nodded. It looked like they were going to pay for what they had done to her. As for Ludo, he still hadn't given up. He just had to reach the core, but he couldn't surpass that subject. Trying to shoot him again and again, but his attacks were repelled. And Jin also didn't miss any opportunity, but the old man exclaimed to him that for him, he would use his hand number 3. And Ryo tried to help him, but for her there was hand number 6, for Vandus number 2, and for the little one hand number 5. Each hand meant something that happened in his life, according to some year or some shock he had. Feeling that subject was impregnable, since he could block every artifact with each of his hands. Zoldi believed that he shouldn't worry if Vandus was there, since he was one of the few who could use more than one artifact. And the boy exclaimed to him that everything was ready. He had already picked up Jabbar. It was time to leave, and they managed to hit Ludo, feeling that it was bad. He couldn't beat that old man, filling up with questions. How much time was left to reach the barrier? They were supposed to all die if they crossed. But why exactly? But his mind calmed him down. Those gloves were a gift from Electo. He still hadn't gotten the maximum potential out of it. The Proto affirmed it. They were a gift from his father, and the most precious thing he had, he should be much stronger than that old man. Much more, and his pistol weapon transformed again. Valdis wondered what that thing was. Was it perhaps a cannon? Even Ryo was surprised. Was he perhaps using another type of garbage? And Jin denied it. Ludo probably doesn't know what he was doing. But the reason Ludo was turning multiple things into multiple weapons was because he was fusing them. But if he concentrated only on a single piece and gave it all his power, he could achieve things like that, but that implied a risk. Clearly, he should be unconscious after that, but it was clear on his face that that was the least of his worries. Right in his mind, there was only one goal: to use any means necessary to save them all. And Ludo raised his hand, yelling at Valdis to move at once, firing his super cannon. This one was amazed by his amazing power. However, he had stopped it because he was still a rookie. But Ludo still had shots left, raising his hand and firing again. All the hands were broken, but the shot wasn't accurate. His comrades felt that he had just lacked a little more. And Jin worried about Ludo. He just gasped. Baldu felt his heart ache, even if he could repair it. He felt sad. Ludo doesn't know why he also felt sad. Because he broke his artifact. The boss felt it was time, calling Bundus. They had reached the border. Also, they had evaluated the beast's durability. They had assessed the strength and weaknesses of their enemies and confirmed the functionality of the artifacts. Bundus apologized, but he had to leave. Due to his personality, he knew he cared about objects, but all his prosthetics were made of his first objects. He should calm down, but Ludro denied it. He didn't want to say that. They were trying to escape, but the boss denied it. That was part of his plan. They had simply been an experiment. Seeing his insults, he asked them to then destroy the core, although it was too late. Since his last rookie was more motivated than ever, and Reyes appeared on the scene, seeking revenge. And the boss asked them to leave and called Ludo. Now he would see a true determination from someone who had given up what mattered most to her. And when everything ended, he would return for her vigilante collection piece, and the woman rose into the air. Remembering who gave her the comb, yelling at everyone that she wouldn't let anyone escape that place. Final blast. On the other hand, the boy just cried. They had left without him. Clearly, he was a failure. Nobody wanted him, but someone from the darkness felt disgusted by him. He had endured enough. They had to change locations. If they had gotten rid of him, they had to get rid of that alliance. And so an enormous whirlwind was shown to us, and the wandering beast was inside the eye of the garbage hurricane. The woman just screamed for her to cross the dam border already. Her hair was already finishing burning. The cleaners felt all that power. No one could move. Ryo only cursed her. He didn't know how strong she was, feeling he should have killed her when he could because of her fault. Everyone was going to die, but a hand appeared. She cursed him. How could she move? She had sacrificed what was most precious to her to obtain her power. How the hell could she keep dragging herself? Ludo yelled at her to pass. Whatever happened was going to crush that dam core. And the crack Ludo had made was slowly starting to break. She couldn't believe it, and her whole body started being sucked in by the hole behind her. She clung to the wall with all her might, but the pressure was too much, and so she was ejected outward from the beast. She remembered her boss's words, who had been the first person to tell her that her hair was beautiful. At that moment, her eyes shone for the first time, just like at that moment, feeling that the barrier was beautiful. And a sculpture of crossed arms is shown to us. A type of cross was reflected in her eyes, and the scenario was shown to us like this. She stretched out her hand, feeling that she had to tell Zottel what she saw. She needed to tell him that if he went further from that place, everything that was precious to him, everything would be snatched away, as the barrier was the watchman. And Jin, for his part, yelled at everyone that they had to hold on to something. They had to do whatever it took not to fly away. Ludo, looking up, for a second half of his gaze had turned completely dark. But he came to his senses. And Jin was still holding on, and looking to the side, the dinosaur looked up. They yelled at her what she was doing. She had to grab onto something immediately, but they came to their senses. Frode asked her to use her ability immediately. She accepted. Ludo wonders what her ability was, but they asked him to watch, and this one transformed into a type of giant dinosaur. Ludo couldn't believe it. He never thought such an ability existed. And she was now covering the hole. And Jin congratulated her. She was a charming girl. And now that everything was ready, they had to start the cleaning. Zottel watched, realized the tornado had disappeared, and Bulldoze seriously asked him what made him think that an artificial wandering beast could cross the border. No person had been able to cross the border, no matter how hard they tried. Sodi told him that it was because the core had the power of protection, and the wandering beast began to fall. Ludo and his comrades hit the core. The protagonist managed to take out the object, and at that moment everything started to collapse. Cursing the situation. They knew that would happen, but never so quickly, asking for someone to grab Sanka. Ludo, being sure, seized the boots, and the gigantic wandering beast started to fall little by little. And the dinosaur managed to get out of it. They congratulated their team. The cleaning was ready. Then she was under the rubble, complaining that that place stank. Everyone started looking for their masks, so they wouldn't die after being saved from that monster. And so everyone was safe. Ludo felt frustrated. He never found out what happened to Ami, feeling useless. They had many things on their minds, and he was dying to eat something sweet. A small break to show the characters in color and some of their characteristics. And also remember that if you are enjoying the video, please give it a like. And also let you know that on Instagram, we always choose the next video by voting without anything else to say. Let's continue. With the video and vehicles approaching, the big guy yelled at Ludo if he was okay, starting to talk about everything that happened. And Gris approached expressing that he was glad he was safe. For his part, Sottel felt that his experiment had been a complete success. With their results, they could confirm his true beast for his journey. They just had to focus on strengthening it. Also, he felt that woman had been an equally good experiment. She had proven to be a true prototype warrior, and he took out an object. Throwing it to Bunduz, he had stopped being a rookie. He had advanced and could join the vanguard of the Vandal elite. His first mission was about the collar device. He had confirmed that they were made through a subject, who probably had an object from the Vigilantes' collection. They should stay calm about the boots and gloves. After all, they already knew where they were. That's why they should focus on finding the entire collection, and when that happened, they would go to heaven. Then, in another place, Ludo just advanced, feeling very nervous. And Jin explained that he had asked for flowers because he never used to see injured people. In front of the door, he felt Sanka should be very sad for being the only one injured like that. That should damage his confidence, but Engine denied it and opened the door. As he saw, that subject, although he hadn't grown up marginalized or oppressed, did get to know what it was like to reach the bottom of a being. But even so, he fought against his weaknesses and dragged himself upward. He knew him very well. He would take his weakness to become stronger. That's why he blindly trusted that he would be the strongest of all. And just then they called him. Lilith had a request. It was something regarding someone from the city of Cambasdan. There was a girl who came to apologize for a spell. And upon entering the room, she apologized. She said that Sanka had received a different spell than the others. She had made the same drawing for everyone. But the thing was that when she saw Sanka, she saw him very serious. Much more than the others. So she felt she had to cast a fun or weird spell on him, and that's why she made another one for him. Although very scared, she apologized and told Sanka to do that move. Upon doing it, everyone was astonished, and silence invaded the room. She apologized, she felt very sorry, but Sanka just laughed out loud. He never thought of something like that. She asked him why he wasn't complaining. He calmed her down. It wasn't her fault. Although her spells were safe, he would never go with only that certainty. He was simply not good enough, still weak. That was simply the problem. It was no one else's fault but his own. He knew it perfectly. And Jin, upon looking at him, felt that this young man was growing. And this one looked at Ludo, asking him if he had something to say. Or was what he felt pity? He clarified again, he hadn't sunk so low as to blame Rimblin for his mistakes. The bad guys cleaned the floor with him. He knew it was completely useless, but he just had to get stronger so that the problem he had would disappear. Ludo felt strange. All his pity for him was gone. Upon observing him closely, he felt that he was truly a great master. But Sanka, seeing him, filled him with complaints about that horrible grimace he called a smile. Then Ludo was looking out the window with a face of indecision, as Rembling looked quite depressed. And he didn't see the mayor anywhere, wondering what to do, and Sanka appeared, who asked him what he was going to do with the girl. Was he going to comfort her? Ludo stammered. Yes, but no. He felt he wasn't the right guy to talk to someone. However, Sanka interrupted him. First, he was going to remind him what he was forgetting, asking him if he was going to look for Ami. He, for his part, wasn't interested in that girl. But in the desert, they had a moment together. Also, he had gotten furious when he saw the boots. It wasn't that she was his priority, because he still didn't even know how to socialize. That's why he should go and learn something. He didn't have to stand still or lament. He should go and help that girl. And if he didn't know how, he had many examples to follow from the cleaners. He would probably never find Ami on his own, so if he talked to Rembling, he would help him. And if he kept gaining experience, maybe someday they could all have fun together. Ludo looked very surprised, almost speechless, but thanked him and said he would try. Sanka, while walking, didn't plan to talk that much. It wasn't his concern if the only thing he wanted in his life was to get his revenge. But he felt that if Ludo only obsessed over revenge, he wouldn't have a good life. And so Ludo presented himself with a lot of personality, exclaiming that he had never made a drawing. He had never drawn, nor did he have any idea about anything, but he wanted to ask him to teach him to draw without humiliating him. This one looked at him and smiled. The scene changes for us. The dinosaur girl felt she had caught a feather. Starting to play with Rimlin, Ludo didn't understand how he had gotten into that mess. 2 hours earlier, it is told that the boss was moved upon seeing such a scene, even more so by Ludo's drawing. Lilith felt that she had the power to recycle and reuse, but not to create. And at that, Rimlin said she was ready to include her drawing in her own mural. This was a mural made by the sorcerers of each generation. It was as if it recorded their stories, but the mayor said he should do that on his own. He was going to rest, and the boss got an idea. He was going to assign the 4 of them a field trip. Lilith didn't understand. Did he not remember the recent attack? They couldn't risk the children, but he calmed him down. They would be fine, even without adults. Besides that, Ludo was the oldest, so he would be in charge of everyone, and asked him to train on that trip too. And upon looking at his sides, he felt that his mission was to protect the others, asking the villains to come over at once. He was ready to fight, and in the distance, Frode and Engine were watching them, as they knew something could happen. And they also noticed another guy, who must have been following Ludo, feeling that he was very stupid, since he didn't even try to hide. At the base, they felt the boss was plotting something, since he never dressed up so much, and an alarm arrived. Semiu informed him that the antitheses of the cleaners, the guardians who maintained order, had finally arrived. And he introduced himself. They were the defenders of the underworld, so they would like to ask them some questions. Here it is explained that these guys are the authority in the underworld. They were trained in the same academy where Zanka came from. And they sought information about Ludo, especially taking him away, but the boss managed to convince him that Ludo was no longer a person from heaven, but one of them. And they couldn't attack a cleaner just like that. He now had the same rights as anyone. As for the city, they informed Ludo that this was the city of the whole. It was famous for its ink. That's why they had gone there to shop, but they had to be careful, because there were many distractions in that place. Ludo got fired up again, because no matter what happened, he would protect them. but they started talking about how they sold ice cream in that place. At that moment, the boy got off the roof and remembered that Zottel was chasing that boy. Remembering that they had abandoned them. Entering desperation, repeating the word orders. Someone should give him orders, and someone asked him to stop crying. He just had to make contact with them, and it is shown that he was talking to that doll, feeling that he was right. All his life he had received orders from others, but this time he would receive orders from the cleaner and Jin. And he went determinedly to Ludo, but now they were desperately asking Ludo to listen. He had to stop, they didn't have any more money to buy more sweets. However, the protagonist had become a demon, who only wanted sweets, and Rimlin only smiled. It seemed he liked sweets very much, laughing out loud. The boy felt that the cleaners were unhinged, they were worse than the vandals. And someone appeared. It must be a kidnapper, who introduced himself, feeling that if they wanted sweets, he had many. Tons of them, they just had to follow him. Ludo calmed down and started to smell him, yelling that he didn't even smell a hint of sugar. Ow! He dared to lie to him, starting to confront him. The boy and the doll fell silent, it seemed they had to wait a little. Then Rimlin was exhausted, she had never covered distances like that on foot, feeling that they were monsters. They had walked 16 kilometers and weren't tired. But the dinosaur explained that the cleaners were used to covering long distances. And he congratulated them on their great job. He had arrived by car, but he already had to train stamina, that's why they had given him that mission. But since it was late, they had to go to sleep. Ludo accepted it, but he still hadn't seen the mural, feeling frustrated for doing so much work and not being able to see it. But Rimlin asked him what he was talking about. The mural was right there, laughing, as it was obvious no one would notice. Everyone thought the mural should be a wall, but they would never think it was up high. The first sorcerer came up with it to be able to see everyone's surprised expressions. Brat and Engine accepted it, it was impressive, feeling that it wasn't what it seemed. They only reached that place by chance, and so Rimblin explained that the last drawing was by Goff. It was a record of his entire history, and his painting would be right behind him. It also showed the painting of the first sorcerer, Makaka Aikal, and so they fell from looking too far back. And looking closely at the first painting, the symbols caught their attention, and they were surprised because the logo of Ludo's glove was the one drawn. She said that the logos were the representatives of Makaka Aikal's friends. They no longer knew all their names, but they knew that logos. He was one of Makaka's best friends. The Undertaker Canny's Gerbrek Ludo was speechless. Stammering, he said his name was Ludo Sherbrek. No one could believe it. Was Ludo perhaps a descendant of the Undertaker Sherbrek? The girl took it as a compliment, feeling that's why they were destined to be friends. But the others didn't understand why someone from the abyss was related to someone from heaven, feeling that Ludo must be a very important connection between heaven and earth. Because basically someone from his family tree could come and go from heaven and earth. And vice versa. Ludo remembers Zottel's words about the Vigilantes collection, since each of those pieces had been used by a single person. And if that human was his ancestor, possibly Canny's, his Erebrek, then if he managed to gather the entire collection, he could possibly cross the heaven border without dying. They were amazed, although he had no relation, since he had already been able to come down without dying. Engine felt that in any case, it was a good idea to look for them. Ami was also there. She had contact with someone who could cross the border, so they had to get the information. But Ludo denied it. He didn't want them to think that about her. She was also his friend. Engine apologized. He had made it sound very bad, smiling. Ludo didn't know why that face was coming, and Rimley asked them what the hell they were talking about. On the other hand, an imprisoned person called weakly asking if they could free her now. She wouldn't say anything about them, the only thing she wanted was to eat cake. Starting to scream desperately for them to get her out of there. She had already given him the boots, thinking that maybe, just like in her books, someone could equally come to rescue her. Then, out of all the complaints, she expressed Ludo's name. As for them, they talked about what had happened, about how Ami disappeared, feeling that it was almost impossible to know whose it was. But someone exclaimed that Jabbar had been the one who stole the boots. "Sir," everyone panicked, asking how he managed to get in there, filling him with questions. But Rimblin calmed them down. No one with bad intentions could enter that city, he affirmed, and asked him why he was there then. And he kindly asked them to make him their servant. Seeing his immediate denial, he felt he could tell them the story about the boots. Jabbar had arrived exclaiming that it was boring, because the boots had been thrown in that place. Ludo understood. Ami had disappeared before the vandals found her, feeling that this told them nothing. Not even a clue. And he also told the beast's plan and why Zadal had done it. And the next objective was the creator of the chokers, asking them to make him their servant now. Ludo started thinking about the chokers. And Jin felt frustrated. He hated doing that, but for now they would go with that subject, the information broker's place. And they would ask him about it. The others felt it was the worst idea possible, but he asked Ludo if he wanted the information. And if so, was he willing to pay any cost? Elsewhere, Zadal was eating a crow, feeling it was time to go to the information broker. Then they gathered, delivering the paintings to Rimlin, who only painted to the rhythm of her life, feeling that she was expressing herself with her heart. The others were just astonished, and she exclaimed that the drawing was ready. Ludo said that after adding his share to the mural, Rimlin had been officially recognized as the next sorceress. And Jin felt he had done a very good job, asking him if he had fun. This one nodded. If it hadn't been for Zanka, he never would have been able to experience those feelings. He had helped him leave some things behind. He wanted to find the Watchman's collection and find Ami, so that's why they would contact the information broker. And he asked him if he would help him. And Jin remembered the first time they met. He never thought of listening to him that time, but it seemed that now he agreed. The boy said that Ludo was very lucky, and he would stay by his side because servants help their masters. And lords. Angie accepted after much discussion, but first he had to earn his trust. Then they were with the boss again. He felt they were right. He was the only one who could contact the information broker. But this one wouldn't give them information, even if they asked. Ludo explained what he wanted to know and why. He explained that that subject had a lot of information, but there was a reason why people weren't going to see him. This was because of the price they had to pay. This varied with each person. It could be something small like money, or in other cases, something as costly as death. That's why it was accepted. He just had to ask him one thing, seriously expressing whether he was willing to accept the consequences. Ludo accepted it. At the same time, a gentleman asked a woman several questions, but she only touched him with her index finger, starting to say phrases from his past again and again, alarming him to the point of making him cry. She just thanked him for coming. Zodi asked him not to waste time, he still had a long way to go, and the girl exclaimed that she had gotten a car. Returning to Ludo, he felt that if they knew where he was, the creator of the chokers would also find Ami. That's why he would ask where the creator of the chokers was. Elsewhere, Tamsi got up cheerfully as usual, dancing. And having fun. He found out after all what Jin and Ludo were going to do, smiling. He wished them the best of luck finding their friend. Then he told everyone that he was going for a rollerblade ride to buy some things, as he moved through the city. He felt that everything was very calm, and he saw a cake, feeling it was a very good idea to buy it, then heading to a distant place. He felt that rollerblades were fun but very tiring, and weren't good for walking. Ami asked him what he wanted. Tamsui actually didn't know what he wanted yet. For now, he would take a look at things. That's why he had to stay a little longer. Besides that, he should be happy. He had brought her a cake, eating it in front of her, feeling that it tasted delicious. The scene changes for us. Gris demanded why he had to go with him. And Jin yelled that it was obvious. It was a 2-day drive. They were going almost to the end of the world. Obviously, they had to take turns driving. Gris accepted it, but asked why the ex-vandal was coming. And Jin explained that he was on probation now. Ryo accepted it. She would also watch him very closely. After driving for 2 days, they finally reached the marked banner, feeling that they had to get on to finish that mission. Ludo remembered all the warnings they gave him about that subject, so he repeated the phrase he would ask once and again so as not to make a mistake. And upon opening the door, a giant armchair was there, and so they welcomed everyone. He was waiting for them. Ryo felt that subject was nothing like what she expected. Ludo was going to ask him if he was the informant, but they silenced him. Ludo the Celestial. And Jin, who hated his real name. The ex-vandal Fu. Gris Ryo Foro. He knew them all. Also, he noticed that he had helped with the mural. He was understanding more things about the Earth, filling them all with memories, questions, and things about his life. And in the end, he asked them what they wanted to buy. And so Ludo seriously asked him to please tell him where to find the person who made the chokers. He turned around and walked away, accepted his question, and if he caught him, he would tell him. Everyone was stunned, and this one fell. Ludo yelled at him what he was doing, but looking down, he asked them to start. His game was extreme tag, and a huge wind appeared. And Jin covered his face. The price he asked for the information was a road chase game, and a type of dinosaur horse appeared. He yelled at them that it was time, they had to come for him, asking if they could capture him. Before the others. His gallop began at incredible speed. Now they felt he was just playing with them, they couldn't capture him. But Jin asked Gris to stop driving so correctly as always. It was time to show what he was capable of. The scene changes for us. The car was at maximum speed, braking everything in front. Angie always loved Gris's racer side. Foro never thought his friend could drive like that. Fu was scared to death. Rillo felt that with that speed they could catch him, but Angie wasn't so sure about that. And in the scenario, some beasts started to appear. Ludo, looking back, couldn't believe it. Thousands of wandering beasts approached, and they were very fast. Fu was still scared to death. Angie asked everyone to pay attention. From that place, they had entered a contaminated zone. That's why they had to put on the masks. They also had to stick their heads out of the car, to be able to defend themselves altogether. He knew they were moving, but it was time to do the cleaning. The old man smiled looking back. It seemed the scenario was becoming more chaotic than he thought. But that's what cleaners were for. And in all that commotion, something shiny appeared. Jin managed to repel them all with one move, but this was only part of all the packs behind them. They approached from one side, but Ryo wouldn't let them get close. The old man laughed. They were incredible. They could even clean while moving. And Jin kept guard in front and above, Ryo on the sides, and it seemed Ludo took the back. However, it was from the back that more came, feeling that maybe Ludo wasn't strong enough to repel them all. The protagonist felt that everyone was doing a good job, so he would also show off. Rembling had given him the brush that had run out of ink, so he was going to reuse it. Starting to leave drops of paint all over the road, and he activated his power. This one was surprised. It wasn't possible. The precision of that boy's powers was much greater than the information he had received. He had squeezed out the little ink he had left and turned them into thorns. Here it is clarified that when the objects Ludo used were gifts, he could get more power out of them. Fu felt he liked vandals, but cleaners were also cool. And right at that moment, another car appeared. Fu, looking to the side, froze. Jabbar couldn't believe it. What was that? But they were the cleaners. It was a beautiful coincidence. So the two of them were competing for information. And they looked at Fu. It seemed he had switched sides. He just screamed for help. The informant felt that they had finally arrived. Jabbar jumped, exclaiming, "I'm here," but Riju hit him, saying he wasn't anymore. This one managed to hold on, feeling that she was the girl who had done bang bang to him. Riju denied it, emphatically it wasn't her. He had gotten confused, but Jabbar jumped towards her. He asked her to do what she did last time again. Riju managed to dodge him. Fu screamed that they always wanted to kill him. Gris asked him to be careful and passed him a mask, asking why the vandals wanted to catch the old man. If they hadn't made the deal, he explained that it was obvious it was because of the person who was driving. Her name was Momoa. If she touched the broker, she could read all his memories, so they had to hurry. Because if Zoldy got his information, he would probably kill the gentleman. But the old man stopped her just then, feeling that cheating wasn't allowed in his game, starting to tell her everything he knew about her. Feeling that this game was about tag, and the only person who had the right to catch him. And buy his product was Ludo. Zoldy asks him then why he chose that route for his game. It was obvious that at the end of that route they would catch him, asking why he was bringing the brokers to no man's land. What would they do when they got to that place? He laughed. He knew it better than anyone. That's why they shouldn't interfere. Meanwhile, Rillo and Jabbar continued fighting. And Jin felt that spinning attacks were the worst for defense, and looking back, he wonders where Ludo was. And seeing the beasts, he asked them not to appear now. They were short-handed, they needed a break, yelling at Ludo that woe be him if he fell. Gris and Foro also had problems. There were wandering beasts everywhere, but if they reached the tunnel, they could get rid of them, and turning, he asked Fu if he could help them. He just doubted his abilities, but Gris repeated that he was one of them now, asking him to please help them. And they were just about to enter the tunnel, and an arm broke the top of the car, exclaiming that as they had asked him. He couldn't go back. And the doll accepted, he agreed. Finally, it was his turn. He wouldn't hold back in the slightest. He was going to make them feel hell. The scene changes for us. Fu explained that he would never be responsible for anything again. That's why he lived following orders from others. Because the responsibility belonged to someone else, and that way he didn't get hurt. And this one sent a scream to heaven, Jabbar. He asked Fu if he was ready to fight, but this one denied it. His name wasn't that, his name was he. The cursed doll he. And Jin and Ryo didn't know what he was referring to. Jabbar accepted it. Now he remembered that was Fu's ability. To let himself be controlled by his cursed doll. He felt the agreement he had with that boy. It's when they gave him orders, he would take his body. And since they had received orders from the cleaners from now on, Fu and he would give them a little help. The portal boy told him that Fu had officially deserted, asking what to do with him. Zottel felt that his body wasn't useful in the darkness, but they were going to enter a tunnel. He had to take care of them. Meanwhile, Jabbar attacked him, but he was repelled. His arm breaking, he didn't understand it. His arm was broken now, screaming that it hurt him a lot. And Jin didn't know what had happened to that boy. The weakling from before had turned his entire body into a weapon, and this one recharged with energy. And jumped forward. Yavar, after receiving such a fierce attack, smiled. He toasted to betrayal. He always knew he was incredibly strong. Ryo was also surprised. He had given Yavar a good kick in the ass, and he got rid of all the wandering beasts. She wondered how to face someone as strong as him. And Jin looked back, and worried, since Ludo should have gotten lost among so many wandering beasts. Yavar exclaimed to he that he would look for him again, pointing out, since he was pure strength. He didn't even fit the concept of strength. It was great. The broker asked them what they were doing. If they didn't defeat the others, they would never catch him, asking why he sent his subordinates to fight, since his best weapon was his coat. Asking them if perhaps he felt that the others could handle the cleaners so easily. Zottel asked him to remain silent. If he revealed information, it wasn't fun. And the portal boy covered the entire tunnel, believing that they could advance up to there, letting out an absurd amount of beasts. And Jin yelled at him to please give him a damn break. The boy apologized to Jabbar, but he would make that boy pay for the betrayal of Zottel. And next to him, something appeared. And Jin asked him how he got out of that portal. This one said that after the avalanche of monsters, he saw a portal and deduced that it would take him where the Vandals were. Or with them. Jin felt it was great. The boy cursed him. That subject was strong, and he also had an object from the vigilante. He had to take down the tunnel before he did something, and an enormous pillar entered from the portal. It was time for everyone to die, but Ludo planted his brush on the ground. He had promised everyone to get that information. Remembering the teachings of painting, imagining something fast, something that would protect everyone. But that would kick the ass of all the bad guys, and a giant drawing broke the entire tunnel. Everyone was ejected. Foro asked where that titan came from, and what those bubbles were. Ludo felt that he had failed. He had thought of something that wouldn't kill anyone, then he thought of rembling, and that titan came out. And now they were all plummeting, the car crashed, but Jin saved them all, however he felt they were too heavy for his umbrella. And so they all landed hard. Elsewhere Jabbar complained because that attack had stopped them, but it hadn't hurt him at all. Fuss felt that once again, he had been left behind. The portal boy apologized, but he couldn't stop them. Ludo, for his part, thanked Rimlin for her gift, and looking ahead they were surprised. And Jin felt that he feared reaching that place. It was Torai, no man's land. This was a place where a beast lived, which reacted to sound. It was a unique beast, and they called it the King of No Man's Land, feeling that this was going to be a stealth mission.